I've never prayed you before. I have no tongue for it. No one, not even you, will remember if we were good men or bad, why we fought or why we died. No. All that matters is that two stood against many. That's what's important. Power pleases you, Crom. So grant me one request. Grant me revenge. And if you do not listen, then the hell with you.
Guten Tag, and welcome to Talking Bird, Two Dudes Talk About. I am Robert Zachary.
And I am Sean Judy.
So, this week, or this month, or this episode, I think people have, we put this out on Twitter, but I think just for people that don't follow us on Twitter, at talkingbirdcast.
You should.
We are talking, this is the first of a multi-part series. We just realized that we don't know how many parts it's going to be. So we'll just call this one part one.
Excellent. On
the work, not the movies, not the life of, the movies of the governor himself, Arnold Schwarzenegger. This episode, I think, is going to be dedicated to Fantasy Arnold, as we're calling it.
Fantasy Arnold.
So yeah, we're gonna keep it limited because as much as I think one of the feedbacks we got about the Alien episode, and it wasn't something that we intended to do, is that we kind of spent a lot of time on the first three, and then kind of like by the end, we didn't have enough.
After 5 hours,
we didn't have enough energy for those, and
it's true.
That might be an indicator. I mean, I'm sure I probably, some people are like, "Hey, man, I got some love for Resurrection," or I don't think anybody said any love about Alien versus Predator.
No.
And we didn't really get into Prometheus and stuff but maybe for another day. Like I said, these
may circle back around.
These are conversations. We can re-enter them at any time.
Yeah, we're just two dudes talking.
Two dudes talking about stuff. And I think, like I said, we're going to do Fantasy Arnold, and I think that encompasses Conan the Barbarian, Conan the Destroyer, and Red Sonja. So let's just get into it, man.
Let's get it on.
I sound like Philip DeFranco. You probably don't know who he is. But
where would you like to start, my friend?
Well, man, I tell you, let me just give a little prep here, because I'm kind of like, I guess we have to start with Conan. Well, we should do it chronologically. Conan the Barbarian. I mean, in preparation, doing deep background, I've been listening to the audiobook of, my incredible true life story. And yes, you're going to be getting so many bad Arnold impressions.
It's true. We can't help it.
I was thinking about this. I was like, oh, maybe we should have a rule, like we can't do more. And then I'm like, forget it. It's just going to happen naturally. It's like, you're just going to have to deal with it.
Got to go with the flow of the blow.
Yeah, the flow of the blow. But
that'll be on the next episode.
Yeah. So it's like I said, I've been doing deep background on this stuff, and I'm kind of, I guess I'm woke on Arnold right now. I'm only like halfway through the book. I'm very
woke.
I'm very kind of, I hate to say it, I'm kind of, respecting the worldview. It's like his career, at least as a businessman and as a actor and all that stuff. I'm only at the point where he's kind of, he just started doing comedies at this point, but it's interesting to hear his perspective on things. And because I used to think like, oh, I've seen these movies. Yeah, I grew up with his movies. I assumed it's like, yeah, he's just probably some meathead dude and whatever. And it's like, I mean, yes, he is a meathead on some levels, but there's a certain,
just with the hired help.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, it's that thing where it's like, wow, there is a bit more premeditation in his career than I would ever have thought. It's like, it just is a, quick aside. It's like, not that a person's financial status means their value, but before he ever made Conan the Barbarian, he was already like a millionaire.
Mm-hmm.
This wasn't like, this was a thing that he developed, and it had a long gestation period. And it's like he wasn't just like a thing where it's like he, won a Mr. Universe and then all of a sudden, like, you're going to make a movie. I mean, he built a career. I was kind of surprised to realize, like, up until recently, I assumed that Conan the Barbarian, except for that Hercules in New York or whatever, I thought this was like his second movie. And he'd actually made a couple.
Yeah.
So it's, like I said, when we're all said and done, and this is put in a leather-bound case, kind of like Charlton Heston reads the Bible, and you put that next to that, it's just two dudes talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger. We'll cover the whole thing. But right now, just to keep things, so your phone doesn't catch on fire when you download it with these huge 5-hour files, we're going to try to keep it limited to a narrow scope this week.
Hey, we're helping America commute, all right?
Exactly.
So the fantasy Arnold.
Yes,
right?
fantasy Arnold.
Fantasy Arnold. It's like Fantasy Island, but better. Like you say, Conan, surprisingly, is not his first movie. It was first Hollywood production, whatever. I mean, I understood that there was the Pumping Iron, which was the pseudo documentary or whatever about the Mr. Universe thing, which brought us Lou Ferrigno and Arnold Schwarzenegger into the public eye.
I'm not going to do a Lou Ferrigno impersonation, but I have done it.
Now that sounds interesting.
Yeah, that's offensive.
And we'll just edit that out later. But yeah, so it was interesting. Like, I did not realize some of the other things that he did. I know that our focus, of course, is going to be the fantasy stuff, but I was surprised to hear that he had done a musical that was a Western. And
was it Paint Your Wagon? I don't know.
No, it was. I forget what it had.
I'm going to paint my wagon. I'm going to paint it good. I'm not bragging. I want to paint that wood. Sorry, this is
going to get out of control really fast. No, but it had Kirk Douglas in it,
right?
And he plays handsome stranger.
I'm the handsome stranger,
and it's a super comedy, and it's interesting because we talked about Arnold went into his comedy phase later in his career, but he had actually started kind of in comedy. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, even in Pumping Iron, he was very much hamming it up a lot for the camera, and he was giving Lou Ferrigno crap for being deaf, and he was like saying stuff to him, and Lou Ferrigno couldn't even like understand what
right.
Like, oh, Big Louie, and I was like, Anyway, so interesting, like, to actually go back and do, because culturally, everyone knows who Arnold Schwarzenegger is.
Yeah, I don't even feel like
level.
I needed to talk much about his biography.
Well, no,
but,
yeah, on some level, everybody knows. I mean, somebody is all about, the Terminator movies or the Conan movies or even his comedy stuff. His people all about twins, and then of course there's the political stuff, and we don't have to get into that. And, and then his resurgence and his return to film and actually some pretty critically acclaimed stuff that's come out recently that he's been involved in. But it's interesting because we talk about, like I said, his comedy phase, but his comedy phase was before he got into serious phase, which was before he got into, his political aspiration, like all these things. It's always kind of been back and forth and percolating. Like you said, the bodybuilding thing and his brand with the Mr. Universe competition it's massive. And I wasn't really, even though we're all culturally aware of him and his career, and we all talk about the Terminator, like I didn't really realize how big of a going concern he was until I went back and started doing a little bit of research for this. He was a big deal.
Yeah.
He was, and one of the reasons why we talked about, like with Conan, he was in development for years, and it wasn't that Arnold wasn't ready to do it or willing to do it, but he had been contracted to do it for like 5 years before the movie actually got made.
Exactly.
It was all the a-holes in Hollywood trying to figure out a script and who was going to produce it and who was going to direct it and what studio was going to pick it up and like all that stuff. Like he was ready to go. And it's kind of sad in a way for me, looking back on this, like thinking about what the Conan could have been or the Conan franchise could have been if they had gotten started on a little earlier.
Right.
Because what ultimately killed Fantasy Arnold was his success.
Yeah, exactly.
And so as a lover of, and we'll just go put it out here, the first Conan movie, Conan the Barbarian, is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Okay.
And I absolutely love this movie. I love everything about it. And it's funny because even now, all these years later in doing this show, I actually discovered some things about it that I did not know existed previously. And I want to thank whoever, whether it's a De Laurentiis Productions or whatever, when they decided to put out the box set or whatever, the 2 movies in one, that they actually put 3 more minutes in the movie that I'd never seen before.
Oh, yeah.
Which completely changes the entire movie.
We need to get back. You need to remind me what the different 3 minutes are, but I do know we'll talk about it later.
So anyway, again, something I've loved my whole life. Every time it's on TV, I watch it. I've seen the TV edit so many times that it's like I forget exactly how awesome of a film it is because they cut a lot of crap of it out, or a lot of it out because of time constraints and whatever. But anyway, we'll get on. But it's a gorgeous movie. I love it, and it's always been sort of part of the soundtrack of my life, literally and figuratively. I love the music in the film, all this stuff. Anyway, so Conan, great, fantastic, interesting. Like I said, we'll talk more about the artistic and whatever elements of it. But it's, again, your take on Conan, your introduction, your exposure.
You're asking for that. Okay,
tell me about it.
So I had to do a lot of thinking about this because, again, this is like the Alien situation. The fact that Aliens was my first exposure. Now, my first exposure to Conan was the comics, of course. Although I wasn't like a huge, it was just a thing. You get him for a dime. It's like, oh, this looks interesting. He's got an axe. Gets in the collection. But really, it was the Destroyer was the first one because obviously the first Conan. The Conan the Barbarian was a R-rated film, and came out in 1980. I was 7 years old. It was one of these things. And even when Destroyer came out, which I think was PG,
yes, it was, yeah,
PG. But some people had already remarked, "Oh, this is they assumed the reputation from the R-rated had carried on." It's like, well, Conan, that's a bloody movie. So I had this deal in my family that if I wanted to see, even as a kid, if I wanted to see a quote unquote grown up movie, now I wasn't able to go see Body Heat using this technique, but it's how I got to see Blade Runner and stuff like that, is that I had to read the novelization first, which is weird when a fourth grader is reading Philip K. Dick to get to see Blade Runner. It kind of skews your brain a little bit. But I had to read Conan the Destroyer, the Robert Jordan. I think he's the guy who did. He's passed away since, but I think he did
Wheel of Time guy.
Wheel of Time guy. Yeah. He wrote.
Was it the movie novelization?
Yes.
Okay.
And he got his start from writing Conan books. I think he wrote 5 or 6 Conan books before he did his Wheel of Time books. So, but as far as like my first exposure to like that Conan the Barbarian, is Dave. Was it Don Martin's parody of it for Mad Magazine?
Oh, okay.
Which is surprisingly, because I went and checked it out recently because I realized that it's like, oh, you saw Destroyer way before you saw Barbarian. And I was like, it's a surprisingly good condensation of the story. It's like it kind of plays up the gore a lot. It's actually gorier as a comic than it is in the actual movie. Yeah. There's a sequence where the Conan in it is, if you know Don Martin, he was a Mad Magazine regular guy. He used to draw a lot of their 4-panel comics, I think. Generally, he wasn't the guy. I don't think he did a lot of the parodies. Okay. The movie parodies because a lot of times they would do more of a semi photorealistic depictions of or caricatures of the thing. And Don Martin had a very had a style, a very specific style. If you look it up, you'd see what it was. So everybody kind of looked the same. It was a weird comic. And there's a sequence where he's in the fighting pits and stuff, and he's literally stomping a guy's guts, and the guts are flying 8 ways from Sunday in this thing. And you're like, oh my God, this movie is the most violent thing that I will ever see when I finally get to see it. And then when you see it, you're like, it's pretty bloody, but it's nothing like the Mad Magazine.
Which is funny because that's like the opposite experience I had with the Alien thing, right? So I read the comic and I'm like, well, that's not too bad. That's not too scary. And then I saw the movie and I pissed myself.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, God.
It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a thing. It's like Conan was like that thing where it's like, again, the comic books popped up, but we couldn't see the movie. And my brother was more of a fan of it. So he had the comics, my younger brother, and I would just kind of flip through them. And it was kind of it's like that weird thing where you don't get a lot of exposure to something, so your brain kind of fills in the gaps. So when you finally see it, it was a little underwhelming at first, but like I said, as time goes on, it's definitely because it's a well-crafted movie, and it's got its own reality, and I think generally it's well paced, even though it's there's a little stuff at the end that I always kind of found to be a little redundant, but yeah, that was that was to the Conan character. That was probably my first, that and like a couple issues of the Savage Sword of Conan that we would have.
So it's interesting for me, my first real exposure to Conan material would have been probably the Destroyer.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
I never read the comics, never read the Howard novels or novelizations or pulp magazine stuff. I never read any of that. Yet it's one of these cultural things where you see the Frazetta painting and you know exactly who that is. You know, the guy with the axe and the bangs. You know, and it's like, I did see, just, you know, as a D&D guy in junior high, and you know, and as someone who imbibed in fantasy, you know, novels and art and things like that, I was aware of the imagery, the Frazetta imagery of Conan, and I was aware that there was a comic book out there, but this was also around the same time that I was heavily into Star Wars and G.I. Joe, and so I didn't have a lot of extra time in my fandom to go hunt down that stuff, but I was also very much, because I was doing the D&D thing as a, you know, kid, and that, you know, when you were aware of these sword and sorcery movies, right? And it always wound up being these things where you're going to somebody's house, you know, birthday party, slumber party, whatever, and we're putting on Kull the Conqueror, we're putting on Beastmaster, we're going to watch, you know, Conan the Destroyer. It's like that whole early 80s epic sword and sorcery thing that was going on, and I was all about it. Now, and again, now, you know, going back as an adult and really kind of like, well, you know, let's talk about this. Let's learn more about this franchise, the movie franchise. I'm finding out that a lot more of these products were actually connected in a sort of a background way than I had originally thought. Like Kull the Conqueror was actually supposed to be the fourth Conan movie or the third Conan movie.
Yeah, I mean, and it's
based on a character from the novels and all that stuff.
Somebody had said that basically, somebody had remarked that the story of Kull the Conqueror, I mean, the story of Conan the Barbarian actually is much more true as a connection of Kull. His story is that Conan, the Robert E. Howard, now I'm not super intimate.
Right.
I've read a few of them, is that he was more of a kind of a gentleman adventurer, and kind of it was like, he didn't have he wasn't trying to avenge his parents. It was a thing, and Kull was more of a thing. He had been enslaved. He was an Atlantean king, and he'd been enslaved, and he wanted revenge. So it's this kind of weird Robert E. Howard thing, because, I mean, that's the way the Robert E. Howard stuff was written in the 30s?
Yeah, something around.
I mean, that stuff was all meant to be kind of like, almost like an assemble your own mythos thing. That, like, he was buddies with Lovecraft or something. I don't know if he ever can talk to Edgar Rice Burroughs, but I mean, these things were supposed to be kind of built on. So it's not so much like, oh, they took the character and then completely bastardized it. It was like, some of the stuff was supposed to be designed to be almost interchangeable.
Right. Well, it was pulp.
Right.
You know, in pulp novels, pulp magazines, whatnot, I mean, it's serialized. It's just a paper format of your Saturday afternoon serials. You know, that the Batmobile goes off the cliff. Oh, is Batman going to survive? Tune in next week or whatever, right? So yeah, and then a lot of the, you know, the stories, it's like romance novels. It's like Western novels. You know, it's a repeated plot. You know, Conan rolls into town. You know, oh, there's an evil thing. It's got to be taken. You know, or somebody comes to him with a quest, or you know, and there's always some chick to have sex with, and and there's always things to butcher. You know, and then Conan makes some banal statement like, "Yeah, that is life," and you know, like whatever, and then he moves on, and it's next week we do it again. It's like any comic book. It's like any, you know, like you say, serialized novel or novel series. You get to a point where you start to see a lot of repetition of the bad guys and the nemesis, and they just change names. And so the Howard purists complain about the movies because, like Thulsa Doom, for example, James Earl Jones's character in the first film, the character is somebody else, but they gave him the name Thulsa Doom. But Thulsa Doom's actually more like a character in another movie, but he's got the different name. And so, like you say, there's this mix and match, pick and choose. And I think part of it I guess part of it is probably there's some Hollywood action going on there where the initial agreed upon final, well, the agreed upon final script is basically saying, look, we're starting a series of films. We want to get it off on the right foot. We want to include as much good stuff as we can in it, because if it's successful, then we get to make more, right? So we're going to cherry pick a lot of crap, because there's a lot, going back now and looking at this, I didn't realize this, but there is a lot of Conan material laying around to pick and choose from. It's like the Star Wars expanded universe in a way. There's like a billion books and comics and things. And you're like, oh, well, I kind of like, and it's like all the characters in the movie are based on characters in the books and the magazines and and the comics and whatnot. They might be given different names, but going and doing some of the research for this and seeing people who are super Howard, fans and apologists, whatever, they're like, oh yeah, no, this character is actually this dude from this story, and Valeria, and she's actually the whatever pirate queen from this story,
right.
And so anyway, so I get it, it's Hollywood, right? Like every person says, oh, the book was better, or the movie wasn't quite as good as the book, and I can see how the people who are hardcore Howard fans would be like, this is not the Conan we grew up with, or the Conan that we fell in love with. But I find it to be a probably, and some critics would agree, but I find this to be, up until the Lord of the Rings movies were made recently, not The Hobbit, but the Lord of the Rings movies, it was probably the most successful and most serious attempt at trying to deal with that sort of fantasy genre in Hollywood. Everything else up to that point have been, and after that, for that matter, is kind of campy and cheesy and shitty and very, felt thrown together, bad special effects, like all that stuff. And like you say, it's a very well constructed, very well, executed vision of what, the Conan universe looks like.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's one of those things where I feel like, having to be like, faithful to the book or faithful to the source material, that's a relatively new development. Now that there's the internet and people can go on Wikipedia and read the entire history of a fictional character, it used to be like, yeah, there'd be one guy in the back like, yeah, that's not really the Conan that I read. But now it's a thing. If you make a book into a movie, you kind of have to follow the book. Back then it was like, let's just, like you said, you got to cherry pick the best things. We're going to get one shot to do this. Let's put all of our best stuff up. And if it's successful, we'll just hire writers to, cherry pick it again, and we'll come up with something else. But the thing about Conan, at least with the people involved, they may not have been the biggest fan of like Conan as a character. Like John Milius, who wrote the script and directed the film, he had never read any of it. And even though people are like, really? Because and then we'll get on to Milius in a bit about that would be totally in his wheelhouse. He wasn't familiar. And even Schwarzenegger wasn't particularly involved with having read this source material. I think he did read it eventually, but a lot of it had to do with that Frazetta art and being like, he was looking for like, I want to be, I have this big physicality and I want to be taken serious as an actor. How can I cross that bridge? And it's like something like playing Conan, that's going to be the ticket for him. So he was immediately on board. But of course, in the documentary that's on the DVD, they talk that the first version of it was scripted by Oliver Stone, and it was a futuristic kind of thing where it's like a post-apocalyptic world with mutants and killer trees, and although it sounded very exciting, it was definitely unrealistic by any stretch of the imagination, because he was like, Oliver Stone was like, oh, I'm envisioning thousands of hordes of mutants. And he kept using the word mutants. It's like all these mutants attacking, which, it's definitely not, that's not Robert E. Howard either.
No.
And it's kind of, I think the film, if they had gone that direction where it was, and they don't really get into the characterization of Conan in his script, I don't think, but I don't think it would have worked nearly as much as as this version did.
Well, it would have been like what is that movie? that's based on the novels. The whatever John something of Mars. What was it?
Oh, John Carter. Of
John
Mars.
Carter. John Carter. Yeah. So when you saw when Stone was like, yeah, I want to have a cast of thousands and we're gonna have them all be mutants and the trees are gonna kill people and all that stuff. It's like, well, first of all, it's sounding a little bit Tolkien-y, but then when you keep saying the word mutants, then I started thinking it's like other pulp sci-fi from that same era, the John Carter series and things of that nature. And like you say, I think the word mutant really has a very sci-fi connotation to it. And so now you've got a thing where it was supposed to be fantasy and it's supposed to be swords and sorcerers and stuff. And you can still have mutants, but you got to call them like goblins or something. Like you can't call them mutants because then everybody starts thinking about spaceships and they start thinking about the X-Men. And it's like, we can't do that. So I'm glad Oliver Stone's original treatment didn't get made, I think, because just listening to him talk about it, I think he was trying to go Cecil B. DeMille and kind of like doing the Ten Commandments or something and going out into a desert somewhere and getting 10,000 people dressed up in these weird outfits and running at each other and then using filters to make it look all special effecty. And
Right, yeah.
And it's like I saw that once and it was the cartoon adaptation of Return of the King. It was terrible. So let's just not do that.
Yeah. And this is a thing where it's, it was a film that was, like I said, he's Schwarzenegger. Now it almost didn't happen because, very famously, I think this is a very famous story that Dino De Laurentiis, who is a big Italian film producer. I mean, he's produced hundreds of films. I think he's passed away since, but like Dune and anyway, countless things. So anyway, he, according to this autobiography, is that he went in and to meet Dino De Laurentiis, and apparently Arnold claims that he likes to kind of say things when he's meeting people occasionally, to say outrageous things just to kind of gauge them.
Right.
Like, for instance, apparently, this is his book, that he said the first weekend he'd met his wife, Maria, that when he met, I guess Eunice Shriver, I guess is the mother, his comment to his future mother-in-law is, Maria has a great ass. And it's just like, oh, geez.
Wow.
I know, it's kind of ballsy, but well,
he's European.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. I'm European. I say things like that.
Stupid things.
But apparently, he said to Dino De Laurentiis, like, why does this? Because he has this huge desk in his office. Why does such a little man need such a big desk? And he said, get out of my office. And they didn't work together for, he didn't get the part or whatever he was trying out for, and so he kind of, when this came up again, that Dino De Laurentiis bought the script from, apparently Oliver Stone was trying to get financing and it just didn't work, and they kind of
he bought it out of production hell, or development hell, whatever they call it. Go ahead.
And then is that kind of scenario where it's like, I don't quite remember how it worked, but eventually they came to a meeting of the minds, and then they had a falling out again or whatever. But it was this thing where it had been in development, and I think Arnold had signed on in 1977 to do it, and he had just done Mr. Universe or whatever. He'd already been kind of starting to slowly get out of the professional bodybuilding game,
right? Because Pumping Iron wasn't that 76 or
something like that? Because it had a weird pedigree, because Pumping Iron had been a book first, and then they tried to use like footage and then create a movie around the book. So it was like the first book came out, and then the book did so well, they go, well, let's go out to one of these competitions,
right,
and film it. And that's kind of where Arnold, with his teasing of Lou Ferrigno and his smoking a J right on the camera and stuff like that, it kind of like people are like, and like I said, he'd already been kind of acting. He'd done that thing with Kirk Douglas. He'd been in Hercules in New York, which I guess at the time had not even come out.
I think that was one of those things that was filmed and then based on his success and other things, people are like, oh, we've got an Arnold thing in the can. Let's get that out there as quick as we can make money.
And then he'd worked, a lot of that kind of, he was kind of on that trajectory that you would see like Dave Prowse had been. It's like, he was on the Lucille Ball show and he played like a strong masseur. He'd come in and goes, "I'm here to give you a rub down," and she'd be like, "Ah," kind of thing.
Right.
It was like you could see that like that's where his career was going to go. He was probably going to do a couple comedy bits because he's big. Because at the time, bodybuilding.
It was not a mainstream thing. It was a fringe sport.
Yeah, people like
it's before CrossFit.
Well, it's funny because I don't know where I was listening to this, but somebody had even pointed out that even 40 years ago, people were suspicious. Like I think it was Schwarzenegger said, people were kind of suspicious of exercise. Mm-hmm. Why would I need to exercise? Why would I need to run? What am I running from? Why would I need to lift weight? Where am I taking this weight? So it was like this thing where people like. And this is partly his own way of doing outreach or whatever, kind of trying to do a lot of TV shows where he'd come on and go, "I've worked out and this is my muscles." And this, he would promote the sport. He would try to promote fitness and stuff. It's like he created the genre for himself, even though at the time he wasn't producing these movies, but he was at a level financially. And he was premeditated enough with his career that he wasn't going to just take any old role after a certain point. I mean, he'd done his crappy,
right.
Get his foot in the door kind of things, but he immediately wanted to improve, stuff. And he wanted something that would, feature his body and all this stuff. And so it's almost like, I think that's why he jumped into Conan. And of course, then again, later in the 80s, he creates his own genre as an action hero, but it's interesting because there is some way you would think it's like really in the 70s this guy, because like again Dave Prowse, it's like he was in Clockwork Orange and he has like one line, and then he's in Star Wars but he doesn't actually have any lines, and then all of a sudden
he thought he had lines.
Yeah, he thought he had lines. So he just becomes like a nothing, which is ironic because the guy with the thick Austrian accent, and it's like all
can't actually speak English.
Yeah,
in an understandable way for the audience,
right? And then he becomes the guy that he's the it's I just find it amazing that they just didn't dub him for like his first 5 years as an actor,
right?
Because it's like his English has never really gotten better. I mean, It's like he even admits it.
Well, I think his English is fine. It's just his enunciation and his accent is so thick. It's just, and whatever.
It's not that he doesn't know the words.
Right.
It's just that he has a very thick accent.
But when you're trying to make a blockbuster Hollywood film, I mean, look what they did to the actor who played Goldfinger in the Bond movie. They dubbed out all of his lines because his German accent was too heavy.
Right.
Even though he's playing a German guy.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm Art Goldfinger, and I'm from just Germans and all this. But they totally dubbed his stuff out. One of the few movies where he was actually allowed, that actor, and I forget his name, sorry, but the actor who played Goldfinger, he was in a movie called Magnificent Men and Their Flying Machines, which was a comedy, which is a fantastic movie, by the way. You guys should all go watch it. That's like one of the few movies where he gets to just talk in his heavy, thick accent because he plays a German officer, circa World War I or whatever, and he's got the Kaiser mustache, and he's like, "Jaws of German," and you're like, okay, so that's how you really sound. You're not the suave, "No, Mr. Bond, I want you to die," that's not how you sound, bro. But yeah, I mean, like you say, especially early on, you're taking it. I mean, again, we had talked, and for those of you who got through the Alien one. The Alien podcast, we appreciate that, but we had talked about the sheer coincidence and the coming together and the convergence of the Force that makes movies. And you would think almost that in that era, that we're making this blockbuster movie, or we're trying to make a Hollywood blockbuster. And Hollywood is so risk averse that you would think almost that they would go through the process of dubbing him out. But I think this movie, he doesn't really have a lot of dialogue, but you would think in a movie where he has a lot more dialogue, it would become more problematic to try and overdub an entire film without it turning into a silly Saturday afternoon Kung Fu theater kind of
Yeah,
situation.
It becomes like Sam Jones in Flash Gordon or whatever. Although it took me years to realize that he had been dubbed.
Yeah.
Because I actually thought that was a pretty good dubbing job. But yeah, no, it did help that he doesn't speak for the first 20 minutes of the movie. It's like you're already invested in the character, and you realize he's like, he's on that wheel of pain or whatever. So I guess after 25 years on the wheel of pain, that's kind of, you would sound like that or whatever. It's
true. I suppose with no interaction with anyone.
Well, it's like, it's ironic because it's like the guy that, I forget the guy that plays his dad in the first sequence that tells him about the riddle of the steel and stuff like that, who is a famous character actor, and I'm blanking on his name.
I can find that out for you.
Okay. And it's like that, he's even mentioned in the commentary on the DVD. It's like, he had very large triceps or something like that.
His name is actually William Smith.
Yes. Bill Smith.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I remember him. He was in this movie. He had very nice triceps. That's the thing about Arnold, is like, he is just like, if he likes one of your muscle groups, he's just going to talk about it. It's like he doesn't have any kind of hesitation about that. But it's funny that he is William Smith character, and I don't know what his mom, the woman that plays his mom, doesn't speak anything. But it's like, where did he get this accent? But his dad definitely doesn't have it.
Well, yeah, because he's talking. Yeah, he does not have an accent, and maybe they're trying to play it off as some kind of speech impediment for Wheel of Pain people. But I don't. Again, there's some minutia in this film that doesn't make sense, and that's one of the things, like the accents and the non-accents and. Why when you hear the dialogue, even in the village, when the village is being burned down at the beginning, and James Earl Jones shows up and Darth Vader's the hell out of the place. He all the actors or the after of dubbing and dialogue recording that happen, all the people in the village sound like North American or West, or
right.
or kind of accents, right? They all sound like they're from the U.S. or Canada, and then you have Arnold grow up on the Wheel of Pain. He's like, blah, blah, and you're like, that's a minor nitpick.
Yeah, you gotta. It's funny because now it's pretty established to be like, oh, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's a retired FBI agent or some disgraced FBI agent and then he's got this thick accent in Raw Deal, which we'll get to another time. Yeah. But it's like.
I know.
I'm not trying. You're just thinking about.
I know, and it's
you're just thinking about Raw Deal.
The next episode we're definitely going to have to do Commando and Raw Deal because it's the same thing,
Right.
Colonel Matrix, somehow some great American Special Forces guy, but he's like, he talk like this, and I'm in just the army. You're like, oh, come on, man. Anyway, sorry.
But yeah, no, it's an interesting. I mean, it's not really a problem. It's kind of like it almost in some ways created this thing where people, it is kind of a joke. It's like, but then again, people liked him so much. It was never an impediment to his career, I find.
Well, no. And I think that, again, it speaks to the artistic quality. And I am using that phrase in conjunction with Conan. Yes. The artistic quality of the film, the use of the soundtrack, the use of the visual cues and the filming of the movie. You don't have to rely on a lot of dialogue from Arnold. It's almost like in Terminator, most of his dialogue is you're reading a heads-up display, and every once in a while he interacts with somebody who says, "I'm going to fuck you, I kill you, I come back and kill you later, I'll be back," like all that stuff. But it's very, very, it's very short. But you don't need that because you know his stated purpose. The story is about other people. He just needs to kill you. He's a machine, right? Well, same thing with Conan. Conan, he's the barbarian, man. He shows up and he hacks the hell out of your village, and he hears the lamentation of the women, and then he fucking leaves, right? And you don't need him to have these big, long philosophical, expositions on the meaning of power and violence and whatever in ancient, wherever. We leave that to the other characters. We leave that to his chronicler, right? With the guy who's giving us the narration of Conan's life. And it's even Subutai says, he's Sumerian or whatever, right? Like, I cry for him because he won't cry or whatever. It's like everybody else gives us what we need about him, so he doesn't have to talk. And so when he does talk, it's powerful, or it's meaningful. I don't know if it's necessarily powerful, but it's meaningful for the character and for the story. But it also allows the audience to not be completely pulled out of the film because they're struggling to understand what he's talking about. It's like all visual cues, All he has to do is, hop off the lady and go, "Crom," and you're like, "Oh, okay, I know what's going on here."
Yeah,
right?
you can just kind of, the movie becomes more of a visual thing. It's like well, I mean, I think that's a testament to Milius's ability to cast this film, which is kind of weird because he did it against. He had like a lot of people that weren't natural actors, like Arnold, and I mean, I guess Sandal Bergman I guess she was known as a dancer, most likely. She had done all that jazz, the Bob Fosse movie, and
right. And Milius said that when he saw her in that film, he knew that he wanted her in a role in one of his movies, and it ultimately came to him with the Valerian character. Like, she'd be perfect for that. And that guy, was it Jerry
Lopez?
Jerry Lopez, yeah.
He was like a surfer.
He's a surfing buddy.
Yeah.
So yeah, Milius was a big time surfer. When his family moved to the West Coast, he became a big time surfer. Went to USC Film School, blah blah, all that stuff. But he knew Jerry from the days of surfing, and it became one of those deals where they went through and they tested a bunch of guys, and they read dialogue, and they did screen testing and all that stuff, and he was like, "I just want my surfing buddy in it." And it goes to all kinds of characters. I mean, Conan's mom is played by, her name is Nadiascu or
okay, I don't know.
Well, she's one of these, I don't know if she's kind of one of these, one name actresses. She's like Madonna or something, but she was big in the German softcore scene in the 70s, right? And she made a whole bunch of movies with her shirt off and like all this stuff. Again, just they started bringing these people in. Somebody that we're going to probably talk about a lot today is that Ole Sven Thorsen or Sven Ole Thorsen.
Sven Ole Thorsen. LaFours.
Yes, Sven Ole Thorsen LaFours, which I'm an idiot. I did not realize that was him until much later. I didn't realize that was him in Gladiator.
Oh, yeah. He's
been in everything.
Yeah.
He's been in every he's been in every Arnold movie. Right. And we'll talk more about his involvement in this quote unquote trilogy of films. But, these guys, the Great Danes, as they were called, like, because there was a whole bunch of Danish bodybuilders and actors that were involved in this. It worked for whatever reason. It worked. And, the film itself is almost like an opera in a way. It's very reliant on the music to cue the audience to what's going on, because there isn't a lot of dialogue. Even amongst the other characters who can enunciate, there's not a lot of dialogue. I mean, James Earl Jones's character gives us a couple really good core speeches about what's going on in the world. And you have, Valerian gives us a little talk about love and warmth in the world. And then the rest of the time it's Arnold as tourist, because he's an adult ass man with a big sword walking around experiencing the world for the first time because he's been on the Wheel of Pain since he was 8.
Right.
And it's fascinating to watch, because everybody gives Arnold shit about, he's just a bodybuilder and he's an idiot and he's an action hero and it's just about explosions. He actually gives a fairly nuanced performance in this movie. The use, and I understand that he was taking a lot of tutelage from James Earl Jones off set, and he was still learning the craft of being an actor. But the use of his facial expressions, the use of his physicality on screen, really we didn't need a lot of dialogue from him, and it works with the character, and it becomes this. It's almost a much richer experience for the lack of dialogue when you think about it. It's a very experiential movie. It's very much a hard, violent thing that we're watching, but Milius makes it work. The people that he got in the roles, the way that he shot the film, and then of course Basil Palladores and his score is just epic. I love that. I listen to that. I probably listened to the soundtrack more than I've actually watched the movie.
Oh, right.
It's one of those. I just love the music.
Bum 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 ba-dum, ba-da, ba-da, da-da, 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 da, ba-ba-bum.
That song, yes.
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 Is that your awakening music when you wake up every day?
Oh, they play that when I walk in the room. Man.
You take your wine skins and hang it on the door.
That's right, exactly.
I'm taking my sword out.
I'm just looking for the riddle of steel like everybody else. Man. But it is it's funny because I am actually a fan of opera and that type of classical music, and I'm a big fan of Wagner. So that music fits right into that. It fits in the wheelhouse, you know. And again, coupled with the imagery, it's so fantastic. I mean, just the intro when they're forging the sword, and you're getting that heavy, bass drum and brass, low brass, and it's just like some shit's happening here.
Well, you can never underestimate how alluring the manufacture of a sword in a movie is. I mean, the truth is like even like Game of Thrones, which is the most popular TV show in the world, they got people still making swords now in these, and people are like, is that Valerian steel? It's that kind of thing where it's like, it's really fascinating to watch because it's like you got to get it hot. You got to pour it into the thing. And then it's like, and that's the swords are so cool in that movie. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's everything from his father's sword as he explains the whole, the value. And it's like, you can take, even though it is high fantasy and it may or may not be, supposed to be set 10,000 years ago or whatever. It's that kind of that idea. It's like, well, yeah, this is going to be the only thing you're going to possess because the skins that you have are going to rot and the food is going to get eaten. But this steel, this thing that we took the earth and turned it into something, it's important. And I think that's a theme that goes throughout, that whole movie. I mean, apparently these swords were like 30 pounds or something like that. And he trained with them and stuff. And it's just like,
well, and this is in an era like, where prop making was still making an actual item.
It wasn't cast resin.
Yeah. It wasn't plastic. It wasn't rubber. I mean, there was some rubber stuff. Like if you want to go down the rabbit hole of this, of the special effects and stuff, apparently there was a big issue with the PETA people
the horse
with the horses, but it turns out that all those stakes that the horse rolled over were actually just rubber.
Right.
And it like nobody, and then the stunt man rolled through them before the horse rolled through. And it's like, anyway, but one of the many things that makes this movie stand up to the test of time, first of all, and two, just makes it so incredibly gorgeous is the fact that yes, Arnold Schwarzenegger is actually wielding a real steel sword, handcrafted weapon, right? And you see they play it up in a silly way in Red Sonja,
right?
But you actually see, the effort that it takes to actually engage in combat in that type of an era, right? In this medieval fantasy type era, swinging a sword is not easy, and hacking through bodies is not necessarily easy. And one of the things that Milius talked about was people complained about how violent and bloody it was. He's like, I want to show people the actual consequences of, what it means to fight with a sword. Like in Hollywood up to that point, it was like, Errol Flynn pokes you in the chest and you go, oh, I'm killed. And you fall over and everybody's like, oh, that's too bad.
Oh, Dickie, it's the end for me.
I know, right? Oh, Schneike. But this one, he was like, no, if you read historical epics and if you read the writings of medieval and ancient historians, cleaving of bodies and the battlefield after a major battle is not a pretty thing.
Right.
And it's not something to, really relish in or revel if you have any kind of, conscience or whatever. But Milius wanted to bring that back to filmmaking, or to at least bring it back to the fantasy epic, because like you said, everything was, all very simple and very hidey-ho, and, like, oh, jolly good, we're going to have a sword fight and it'll be great. And, and like, I'll poke you with my letter opener and you'll fall down and I'll get the girl and happily ever after. This thing is like, I'm going to hack you, but now I got to hack you again because I didn't completely sever your arm. And then it's like, there's blood everywhere. And it's, some people say it's overly celebratory of violence, and it takes too long and too loving of a look at it. But I think it's more of a kind of a warning in a way, or more of an admonishment of the fact that it's like horror movies. People are like, oh, it's gory or whatever. But it's kind of like, that puts you in that uncomfortable space where you're like, I don't know if I should be enjoying this or not. You know?
Right. And that, I mean, I think anything that's like this should always subtly add that layer where it's kind of, you know, it's like, yeah, I don't know. I guess an example of, I mean, I don't know. It's like the kind of the criticisms or maybe not criticisms or of like, say, like something like the first 20 minutes of Saving Private Ryan, which people are like, you know, that's probably the most gory 20 minutes on film that I've ever seen.
It's the most realistic portrayal of actual combat.
Right. And then some people say, well, you're glorifying it. And it's like, well, how could I be glorifying it when people are like, you know, in some ways it's like I said, Conan is not like that, where it's prescribing this thing. It's like, why do we have to fight? You know, I just want to pick flowers. I mean, he's definitely down for it because he's got revenge and stuff like that. So there is advocacy. And, you know, John Milius is kind of, you know, what does he call himself? The Generalissimo or whatever. I mean, he's back before, you know, the rebirth of the term fascist. I think he would have been the kind of guy who'd say, I'm a fascist filmmaker. You know, it's my way or the highway. It's that I got to show strong people. I mean, he is one of the architects, not necessarily directly, but even kind of parallel and diagonally and all this stuff. He was kind of the architect of the 80s, not just the fantasy stuff, just the action that kind of.
Well, he gave us Red Dawn.
Yeah, he gave us the, you know, the movie of my nightmares, but the survivalist fantasy of Red Dawn and you know, Conan, and I'm blanking on anything else he.
Well, it
was kind of a decline after that.
He wrote.
He wrote Apocalypse Now,
right? And which is another great film that we should probably talk about one of these days. But he wrote one of my father's favorite westerns, the Judge Roy Bean with Paul Newman.
Oh, I've never seen that.
Oh, it's based on a true character. He's a frontier judge, basically. He's like a gunslinging judge. You know, you drag him into the saloon, he tries you, and then shoots you in the parking lot, kind of a thing.
Okay. He's Judge Dredd at Western style.
Basically, yeah. He could be the character that Judge Dredd was based on in a way. I mean, he's an actual historical character, and so it was his treatment of that. But anyway, actually, very well done by Paul Newman. But he definitely has a reputation and he has a style that his movies are, you know, I guess you could say, I don't know if you could say fascist in the sense of
not in the 2000
subject matter,
not in the 2018 term, but
well, shit, everybody's a fascist in 2018.
Yeah, I know. I just mean in the fact that, you know, he's interesting because I always think it's like Milius is one of these guys where a lot of his mythos, his circles around his like this deep reverence of, you know, history and historical battles. And apparently, at least how he always says it, is that, well, he apparently was 4F. He couldn't go to Vietnam.
Right.
And he wanted to do this so badly. And the weird thing about it is the way he talks about it is like it was a foregone conclusion. His mind is like, well, I was going to go to Vietnam and I was going to die. And then it's like, but it's like that thing where he has to act like, I don't think he's ever like tried to pretend like somehow, well, I served in my own way or something. But
no,
it's
he
like,
doesn't do that.
But he was in love with it so much on a level that it's like, but he never, you know, since he never even got into basic training, he never really got to see the reality of what it's like to be in the military. So he always, it's like he operates at that 17-year-old who's, I'm going to, like, the minute I can sign up without my dad's permission, I'm signing up for the Army, kind of a way of filmmaking, which, yes, it gets, you know, and I'm talking about kind of a holistic thing, kind of it's jingoistic, it's kind of stuff, but it's kind of, it's like the purest representation. It's like if he was more like kind of looking back and going like, when are these wars when will man learn not to kill another man? If that entered into his mind, I don't think
never been in his movies.
Yeah, it would never have. His movies never would have been any good for the kind of thing he was trying to achieve.
Well, could you? So, to go with this, like we're talking kind of about a trilogy of films here, and I know he didn't make the second and the third installment. He didn't make Destroyer, and he didn't make Red Sonja. But I think that if he had the sensibilities that you're speaking of, the why do we fight kind of thing, and the who are we to kill another person, like all that kind of stuff, or if he was trying to make these lecturing films about, the consequences of war and violence, we would have gotten Red Sonja first.
Right.
And we would have gotten even the Destroyer first. We wouldn't have got the Conan, because Hollywood, reared its ugly head and got involved in the Conan franchise and started to say things like, well, we really like the first one, but could you make it less bloody? Right.
Right.
Well, we really like the first one, but could you have less nipples in it? Right. Like, we really like the first one, but could you make it more upbeat and add more humor? And then next thing you know, you get the Destroyer, which is terrible, and then you get Red Sonja, which is even worse.
Right.
And next thing you know, you're Ryan Johnson, right? You're like, hey, let's put a joke here where it really doesn't belong, as I'm cleaving you in half. You're like, I'll stick around,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of stuff that ultimately we got. The great thing about Milius is, at least in his treatment of violence, is a very interesting thing. And I know he gets a bad rap, and everybody, they give him shit because he's a Republican and all this other crap. But it's like, his treatment of violence is a very interesting thing. It's kind of like shoving the dog's nose in the crap, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's, look what you did, people. Look what you did, humanity.
Right.
This is the best you have to offer is hacking and shooting and like vigilantism and like all that. Like, this is the best we have to offer. And it's, in one way, it's great storytelling and it's visually compelling. But it's also, I think, he gets a bad rap. I think he's more admonishing in a way with the way he presents his stuff. It's like, Conan was a kid and he was growing up with his family, right? And I know that he's dealing with a character that's already
but his that's his Conan.
But his Conan is this kid who's growing up with his family, and he's just out in the woods fishing, and his dad is the town blacksmith, and like everything's great, and it's like idyllic. And then in comes Thulsa Doom and his thugs, and they just kill everything. They butcher everything that he knows and loves. They drag him off and make him a slave. So what's the guy got? And Thulsa Doom says it at the end. I made you this. I gave you this. And I was like, I turned you into what? I gave you your purpose in life. But the thing is, what is that purpose? Right? His purpose is revenge and brutalization and murder, right?
Right.
Because he has nothing on his mind. He's resigned to the wheel of pain for life. And then his master takes him and sends him to the east to get sword training. And first makes him a pit fighter, right? Makes him a gladiator. And when he's successful at that, and even the chronicler says, life and death the same, all this crap, but he found worth, right? He found worth in the cries of the crowd, he found fame, ultimately becomes a sword fighter, and then he gets let free in the world. So his entire life has been either being brutalized or brutalizing others, and then he's just released into the wild. And you're like, oh shit, kind of thing, what's going to happen now? And I think, it's like it's the hero's journey in reverse, right?
Yeah.
We get like Luke Skywalker's like, oh, he's a farm boy, and then something bad happens, but he redeems himself and saves the universe, and it's all for good. And it's like the other way around. It's like the universe is doing fine, and then Conan shows up and he fucking kills everything.
Yeah, it would almost be like he would I don't know. It's like if Owen and Beru died, and then it became like he's literally goes, all right, we're gonna kill every stormtrooper from here to Mos Eisley.
Yeah, like he goes into town.
He just starts,
takes the rifle off of his land speeder and just starts popping stormtroopers. Right?
Yeah.
Or he gets to the choice at the end, and instead of saying no, I'm a Jedi like my father, he's like, fuck yeah, I'll rule the galaxy. Me and Darth, we're going to kick some shit, and they're going to drive off in the Death Star and blow up some shit, and he just becomes like the evil Luke from Dark Empire comics or whatever. But it's weird because it is the hero's journey. You start with status quo. He's the fishing kid, and then you have the tragedy that puts him at the nadir, which is down on the wheel of pain. And then there's the mentor and like all the stuff that comes along, and he starts to get in the climax of the story. Instead of him defeating evil, it's just that he supplants evil. Right. He kills Thulsa Doom, but what has he really done? Yeah, he's killed a demigod, despot, sorcerer guy, but he's installed himself now. It becomes very Colonel Kurtzy at the end, right? I killed the guy. I completed the mission, but what happens next? I just become the next Colonel Kurtz, right? I become the next, wackadoo in the woods with a bunch of followers. And the reason why I say that, and we'll talk about this now, the 3 minutes. Okay. I've watched this movie 1,000 times. Every time it's on TV, of course, like I said, it's cut for, time and all this other stuff. And they cut out all the violence. I've never realized, I've seen this movie from beginning to end on television, on VHS, like all stuff. At the end, Osric's daughter. Okay, so the versions that I had seen coming up to this point, Osric's daughter is there. Conan comes up on the steps with his father's broken sword. And he has that last interaction with Thulsa Doom, and then he hacks his head off, and he throws his head down the stairs. And then he goes, and then you see him sitting there contemplating. And then he spins the burning urn up into the mountain, burns down the thing, and that's the end of the movie, right? Well, all the followers drop their candles into the pond and they all leave, right? Symbolizing that, that the cult is dead and all that other stuff. There's actually scenes in that have been cut out of the daughter. She helps him get into the castle, right? She leads him in. She uses her access as Thulsa Doom's,
yeah,
because
he was going to sacrifice her, and then they saved her, and she's now no longer part of the cult.
Right. Well, in the movie, when I originally had seen it, the last interaction we have with her is she's chained up at the Stonehenge thing. Thulsa Doom tries to kill her with the snake arrow. They stop that. She's all crying and calls him father and all that stuff, and then she's kind of like, then she disappears at that point, and she becomes this afterthought, right? They always say we go kill Thulsa Doom. Now the mission's over. It's implied we take her back to King Osric and all this other stuff, right? Two things, and we'll talk about the deleted scenes later, but the other thing is, so at the end, we see her actually leading Conan through the back door again into the castle. She, waves a few guards away, and then he like hacks the hell out of him. And then he goes up there and he does his whole interaction with Thulsa Doom. But you see her on the steps, and she's like all worshiping now at the feet of Conan. And she does this thing where she used to bow to, like, as we see her earlier in the movie where she, is going up the stairs and she has the snakes and she crosses her arms and bows to Thulsa Doom. When he comes back down the stairs after whacking Thulsa Doom's head, she's now bowing to him.
Right.
And she's like worshiping him on the stairs. And then he reaches out to her. So after all the followers drop their candles or whatnot, he reaches out to her, or she reaches out to him, whatever, and they like hold hands and they walk off into the sunset. And that's the actual ending of the movie, right?
Right.
Totally different. Because it used to just be, oh yeah, okay, the girl at that point, she still felt like she might be devoted to Thulsa Doom, even though she was betrayed by him, but she sure as shit wasn't identifying with Conan or any of the guys. I mean, they were dragging her back to her dad, and how are you going to keep him on the farm after they've seen Carl Hungus and all that, right? But they're dragging her back to her dad, and so you get this feeling like, yeah, they completed the mission or whatever, but there's no thanks from anybody, right? It's just it's just Conan,
which is exactly the invert of the Destroyer, which that almost goes on so long that you're like, oh god. Anyway,
yeah, but just the amazing thing to me is that just those couple of minutes that they throw in there totally changes the ending, because now you've set up the thing where forget about what came afterwards in the films, but you set up a thing where now we heard that Conan was going, at the beginning, the chronicler said that he was going to wear the jeweled crown of Aquilonia on a troubled brow, and he was going to create his own kingdom by the force of his own hand. And you get the impression from that cut of the film, you get the impression that this is the beginning of him forging his kingdom. He's like going to go back to Osric and be like, yeah, the 2 tons of rubies you gave me and the gold cups, that and your daughter.
Yeah.
Right? And like, let's talk about a thing. And the other thing was, it's even more set up if you watch the deleted scene where Osric gets killed.
Right. Well, they filmed it, but it looked so bad that they couldn't get it to work.
Right. And so now
this will begin to make things right.
That's right. This is
Outrageousness!
what insolence! What arrogance!
Arrogance!
I salute you. So the shit. That's again the quotability of this film is fantastic.
It's absolutely the most quotable film that has the main guy not speaking, not be having a particularly clear accent.
Dinner for wolves. But so you get this thing where now if we'd had the scene where Osric is killed and we leave in the 3 minutes with the girl, you have now totally set this thing up where Conan is walking off with a princess for a kingdom that has no king, right? And it's the age of high adventure, bitches. Let's go do a thing. And then what we get with the butchering of it through the TV movie, cut downs and the not including of certain scenes and whatever. And then the continuation is we get millennial Conan who's like laying around crying about his ex-girlfriend, and
I miss my Valeria.
I want the girlfriend, and I
don't
not
understand. It's like, where's my Valeria? We're just going to be like 2 hours of me doing that. It definitely, even though it made 40 million, I think, when it came out, which is really good for 1980. It's had of interesting. Well, it's back before. This is back before how things were presented on home video. Well, I guess that version never showed in theaters either. But
no, I don't think it did. The original theatrical was like 127, and the DVD one is 131.
Did they ever say why they went for that version, or was it cut by the studio, or did he make a decision? I forget because I
don't know. I think it was cut. I want to say it was cut by the studio for the theatrical release because they felt like it was too long. I also think that there was some concern that it appeared that Conan had moved on from Valerian rather fast.
Oh yeah.
You didn't have to have it be like, oh, this is going to be his new girlfriend or whatever, but the implication of her worshiping at his feet and then him kind of carrying her away at the end implied that Valerian had been replaced, and I think that they were trying to show that the one good, pure part of Conan was his love for Valerian and her love for him, and how it's eternal and all these things, and that ultimately led to some seriously bad choices in the next film. But I could see why that. But he's Conan the Barbarian, man. He rolls into your town, he humps your witch, he punches your camel. He eats all your weed, and then he goes and kills your gods, and that's what Conan does on the weekend.
It's not weed, it's Black Lotus. Black
Stygian,
Lotus.
the best.
The best.
Chew slowly. It's the good stuff. Again, highly quotable movie.
Highly quotable. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why, I guess Universal has history of that era, that's the I think was Sid Sheinberg running Universal? I don't know. But he's the guy that I only say that because Sid Sheinberg was the executive that plopped the happy ending at the end of Brazil or whatever for TV or whatever. So I was wondering, it's like maybe that was that was the kind of thing because of the development of, this kind of, post 70s blockbuster era, which, Conan was being developed in the era of Star Wars, yet it didn't sound like Star Wars success became a big factor in the creation of Conan. It wasn't like a thing like midway through the, pre-production, they go, oh, all right, we need to drop a lot of the violence. Let's not kill Tulsa Doom. Let's have him injured and he can leave and we can do a sequel. So it's like the nice thing about this movie is it is like now in some respects people, actually not now, but some people might call this movie greasy kid stuff, but in some ways, like you were referring back to, saying that maybe Oliver Stone's version of the script maybe had taken some things from Cecil B. DeMille, that kind of thing. This Milius is almost kind of like a John Ford kind of situation. Yes. It's that kind of
Ford Apache.
Yeah, it's not a epic. But it is an epic. It's a story. But it's singular. It's not. Right. It's not going to be, tell my Ramesses, whatever, Yul Brynner and, you know, all that stuff.
Right.
It's more of like, goddamn Comanche, that kind of, you know, an idiom that you exist in the margins.
Yeah.
Whereas Cecil B. DeMille, you're either at the highest of the high or the lowest of the low, the characters. Right. These people are kind of off to the side. Because I even get the feeling that even Tulsa Doom was a kind of a character that maybe he had like worn a few hats in his life. It was like, oh yes, when I was young and I was raping and murdering and chopping, and well, now I found religion, the snake religion.
Well, and the great thing about that is, you know, the character of Tulsa Doom is in a lot of ways, he is a warning to Conan. Like, yeah, he's the creator of Conan, but he's also the warning to Conan. You know, Conan had a singular pursuit, and his pursuit was revenge. And Tulsa Doom's singular pursuit was steel, right? And it turns out that, in the words of, you know, Commander Spock, having a thing is not so pleasing as wanting a thing. It is not logical, but often true, right? And Tulsa Doom spent his whole career raping, pillaging, slaughtering to get steel, and then he realized that it was a wasted pursuit, right?
Right.
And that instead of steel, I mean, now this is all evil stuff, right? It's like your evil hierarchy of needs. It's like, well, I stopped raping so I could start murdering. You know, he said, you know, he basically stopped accumulating things.
It's like Maslow with a goatee, though.
That's right. It's a hierarchy of evil needs. Instead of acquiring things, he started to acquire power, right?
Right.
And that's his ultimate realization was, you know, the power is the most important thing, and that's what the riddle of steel is, of course. And not only is it forged by the hand, it's absolutely worthless unless it's wielded by a hand, you know. And so then what's the most powerful thing in steel's life? The hand, right? And what is the hand? The hand is a person, it's flesh. You know, and it's, again, it's a very deeply philosophical thing to get from a movie where a guy's riding around in a leather loincloth, you know, but it's a very, you know, a very interesting meditation on the world and how we interact with things, and you know, it's actually very
I mean, it's
germane to the debate today.
It could be a, you know, the thing is, you know, Conan the Barbarian could be a metaphor for, you know, Western expansion. You know, it's like, it's like, it's not, there's a universal tale of the, you know, the oppressor and the oppressed, and then at what point in your pursuit of justice do you become just as bad as the thing that you want? And now the Conan doesn't confront that till the very end, really, but it's much more explicit. But yeah, there's a lot more going on, and I think you know, Milius, if he doesn't, I think it's just the sum total of that kind of his interest in that kind of, you know, the brutal origins of our society, and him being well versed in it. Maybe he doesn't express all of that, but you can definitely see, like, again, it's the deep background of, it's like, I've read about the Vikings, I've read about the, you know, the Sumerians and this and that and the other thing, and I know all this about the Roman legions and Sparta and all this stuff. There's a lot more there than you realize on first blush, because I mean, like I said, he did cast to a type, and I'm not going to sit here and go, oh, Jerry Lopez, man, that guy should have gotten an Oscar for it. No. He kind of looks a bit like John Wayne as Genghis Khan, you know. It's kind of like
it's a bad mustache.
It's like a, you know, a Latino dude or whatever, like trying to be Chinese or whatever, and it's kind of like,
or Mongolian.
Yeah, Mongolian. Yeah, he's supposed to be. Apparently, they say he's like, but it doesn't line up with the timeline. It's like, oh, he's supposed to be like one of Genghis Khan's people, and it's like, well, that's
the name is very similar to one of Genghis Khan's generals. And so it's and his look and his thing is you know, very Mongolian, northern steppe kind of stuff. Again, I think, like you say, this is Milius in his understanding of history, and is wanting to, you know, diversify, I guess, the cast in a way, and say, you know, show all the different clashing and competing cultures that are in this world. You know?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a good thing, because I mean, to be perfectly honest, it's like they don't, like, say, like Lord of the Rings, they kind of undersell the villains being like, the bad guys are orcs. And then by Return of the King, you realize, oh, there's like weird traders from other parts of Middle Earth that are doing the bidding of Sauron, but you only get to see them in that one sequence where they attack the boat and stuff. And it's like so Milius was able to kind of show this, even though I guess you got your dwarves and your thing, but he was actually able to show, I don't know. I don't even know what my point is, but let's keep going.
No, but he does. He shows this diversity. The movie starts out in basically a Viking story, right? It's in the frozen north or whatever. And then he moves into, there's this nondescript sort of Russian steppe kind of, high desert place where he goes and becomes the gladiator. And then he goes to Asia, right? Or whatever the version of Asia is in this. He goes to the east to learn from the masters and all that stuff. And then he comes back to his hometown or whatever, comes back to wherever they meet King Osric. And then we move around from city to city, and then we finally wind up in Thulsa Doom's palace or whatever. And then we talk about, the King Osric is sort of the Middle European, kind of king. And then like I said, we've dealt with sort of the Asian cultures with the sword fighting masters. We've met people from different, ethnic groups and whatnot. We have all these different religions.
Oh, yeah.
Which is also a very interesting ththing because, everybody talks about how Milius is I've heard the comment that Conan is some sort of right-wing fantasy. And I laugh at that because it's incredibly diverse and it's also not conservative in any way when you think about it. But,
he doesn't,
well, first of all, his discussion, the meditations on religion, right? Just take the theme of religion from this movie for an example. We have two dudes who, like us, who are talking in the woods, right? And they're eating their chicken and they're talking about religion,
right?
And the first thing he says, "What gods, plural, do you pray to?" Right? So we've established we're in a polytheistic society. Or world, right? Where there's multiple religions based on multiple gods, right? Which is so not a conservative thing, right? Because conservatism is so monotheistic, and like all that. And then you have this whole other discussion where, again, I think Milius is giving us these societal warnings, like don't get too caught up in your brand, kind of a thing. Because the two guys are like, well, it's like my god is Crom, and he is in this mountain of power. And he's like, well, my god's the four winds, and your dude lives beneath him, so suck it, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, right.
But then they don't fight about it.
They don't fight about it. But the thing is like, Crom has been like the one thing in his life, right? Because he's like his father taught him about Crom, and that's the only thing he took away from his people and his village, and like that's the only thing. Him and Crom are all that's left of his people, right?
Right.
And he's probably been thinking about Crom a lot on the Wheel of Pain for the last 12, 13 years, right? And so then he comes out and he's like, I paid for Crom. And it's like, and everybody's like, Crom, he lives in the basement, dude. That kind of a thing. And it's kind of like, wow, you really just needed to reframe your entire worldview and your entire religious sort of sensibility, because when you put it like that, it makes my god sound like a real loser. Like he hides in the basement.
Well, and then you get the payoff in about 45 minutes or an hour when he does his lamentation or his prayer before he goes into battle, and he asks and he wants revenge, and then he becomes, because he's now a man of the world,
right?
He becomes practical, and he's like, and you can't give that to me, then to hell with you,
right?
Which is any person, at least, who has a metaphysical sense of their mind at some point in their life has gone like, well, fuck all this.
Right.
If it's not going to, if you're not doing anything for me, then what the fuck's your point?
Right.
And I think it's quite.
Well, we watch him go through the entire, he goes from believer to agnostic to atheist in the course of the film, because he's told your whole life you need to prepare to face Crom and you need to get the answer to the question. Right. And then he starts to go out into the world, and there's snake gods, and then there's the four winds, and then there's all these other gods, and he's starting to figure out, like, okay, there's a lot of other stuff going on out here, so maybe mine isn't necessarily right or the correct one, or if it even exists at this point. And then at the very end, he's like you say, you Crom /God / whatever, enter your deity here. you got one chance to prove to me that you're the real deal, right?
Yeah.
And that's maybe the one thing that gets carried forward into the Destroyer that actually works, is because he does say to Crom, all that we want to know, it's like, I want revenge, but what's more importantly is that everyone knows that, men fought here and they fought well and they died well and like all that kind of stuff. And he gets his revenge and he gets the notoriety, or he gets the recognition of the good fight. So then we see him. How does the second movie start? He's praying to Crom, right? So that's like the one good thing that Destroyer does. That's even the payoff after the payoff. He goes through this whole thing, this arc where he's jettisoning.
There's one more syllable on it.
I forget. He's
jettisoning.
Pitching, yeah, there you go. He's pitching it overboard. He's pitching religion overboard, and then at the last minute, it bites him in the ass, right? Because it's like, oh, by the way, you got what you wanted. Right? Yeah. Oh, and by the way, your girlfriend came back from the dead.
It's kind of like the what is it? What happened to the little boy that
Broom Kid,
who wanted everything, got everything he wanted. He lived happily ever after. Right, it's like Willy Wonka or whatever. What happened to the barbarian who prayed to Crom?
He got everything he wanted. That's right. Yes. He got to punch the camel.
So have we said everything we want to say about Barbarian and move into Destroyer, or do we got more that we want to?
Well, I guess just a little wrap up on Barbarian. It's like you had mentioned earlier. Too many people write off Barbarian. They watch it on the first viewing and they're like, oh, it's dudes in tights. And there you got swords and whatever, and there's nipples and, blah. It's no big deal. But I really think that it a lot like Alien 3 that we talked about, upon further viewings, and if you actually sort of let it soak in a little bit, you find that it is again, it's a deeply nuanced and very serious movie. It's not Beastmaster, right? It's not a guy in the loincloth running around.
Don't be knocking Beastmaster.
Yo.
Dar of the emo rights.
See?
We can talk about Beastmaster.
Well, we can do that. Yeah, we can do one of those too. But
I'll throw down with Coscarelli.
But I mean, it's a very, I thought it's a very, very thoughtful and very, very deep film. And there's a lot of subtext. Again, we have the few speeches that we get, or the few pieces of dialogue that we get, are really brilliant. When King Osric is sitting there and he says, when all the gold ceases to sparkle and all the jewels lose their luster and all that's left is a father's love for his child, like, that is a powerful, powerful thing. That is a very serious statement about what's really important.
Well, especially in a time, and again, I understand this isn't history, right? But I'm saying let's just call it the good old days, quote unquote. But there's that fallacy that somehow life was cheap back then,
right?
Like, oh well, everybody
died at 10.
Everybody died at 10, and cutting your thumb on a rock would kill you or whatever. That's true to some extent, but it's I think what Milius is saying is that he is pointing out that actually, no, life meant a lot, because it was so short.
You had
your sword, or your whatever, your means of protection, your land, your thing, and you had your family and your friends. I mean, Ken, you made friends, family. That can be an interchangeable, at least in this context. It's like, he doesn't have any. There's no other Sumerians left for him. He can't rebuild his people.
Right.
He can't even put forth his line, because his love, the only woman that could match him in battle, which again will ironically comes up in Red Sonja, but
yes.
But I mean, Valeria is really his thing, and another thing about people talk about this, Milius and stuff. It's like, well, he has he has a woman fighting by his side that he doesn't go like, no, you stay here, I fight for you. You stay up here with
make me breakfast.
You make me breakfast and get ready for my seed or whatever.
I need you to press my undies.
She is absolutely an equal partner in this.
Yes,
and it's like everybody to their own talents, and it's a very egalitarian worldview. It's like, if you're weak and you need protection, there is protection out there. There are people that will protect you for a price or whatever, right. But like Osric's daughter and stuff. And then there's, you know, and then there's people who are strong, and it's like if you can fight. And of course, Conan is attracted to a woman that can. He had the crazy witch out in the woods or whatever.
Everybody needs one of those.
Well, he had the women given to him
that
he took in his Gladiator, which is very Spartacus or whatever. I mean, there's a whole scene of that in Spartacus, and then
some men prefer oysters.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then there's that scene too. There's that great scene, which I know it's
with the priest guy.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's in the 2018 it seems like a gay joke, but I don't view it as that. I can view it as a comment on the, I don't know what the beliefs of the Temple of Set really were, but it's this idea that somehow the people that wear the priestly robes, they still, as much as they like to pretend they exist in a rarefied air of spiritualism, that they still have carnal needs.
Oh, yeah. Well, especially when the cult in and of itself is a major orgy party, right? When we get into Thulsa Doom's castle,
right?
They're eating people and fucking a lot,
ham soup or whatever hand soup,
hand soup. Yeah.
It's just I mean, there's a lot of little things like that. It's this kind of, and it's Yes, it is comical that I'm very shy or something.
Well, and again, it's funny because when we get into the Destroyer, there's this whole thing like, well, yeah, take away the guts and take away the sex and make it more funny. But there is some extremely funny stuff in Barbarian because, like I said earlier, Conan the tourist, right? So he's going into a city for the first time in his life, like a real quote unquote metropolitan city from the ancient world, right? Walled city. Lots of people packed in, open sewage, kind of crap. And the first thing he says, does it always smell like this? And he's like, how does the wind get in here? And I laugh because, it's true. You go into a major city today and you're like, well, the smell of urine, they're on the street corner.
It's like if you haven't smelled the smell of dried piss in downtown Seattle,
you're missing out,
on an August. Yeah. You're just letting the best things in life go by.
And what are the best things in life?
See your enemies.
To have your enemies crushed.
Yeah,
see them driven before
I won't
you,
do it.
And to hear the lamentation of the women. But the other thing about this is, you talk about it being egalitarian, and a lot of people complain, and especially in 2018, we're living in an era where we're in a heightened state of awareness of gender and gender representation. And we're in this movie, people are like, oh, it's just all sexy time. It's all titties and blah, blah, blah.
Well, it's the male gaze fantasy is what they would... Yeah.
Right. But if you actually sit back and you think about it, the entire movie objectifies Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Like, only in, the snowstorm is he wearing a jacket. The rest of the time, he's walking around in leather panties, right? All oiled up, and he's tied on the tree of woe, and he's... laying out there and he's flexing and
there's more skin than the ladies.
And then the other thing is his character is objectified. The whole scene you were talking about earlier where he's in captivity learning how to fight, and they're talking about breeding him to the stock because they want better swordsmen, right? So he's laying with all these women or whatever. The entire school staff is watching him in his cage, right? Like it's not, again, people, they don't give it a serious look and a solid watch. They just go, oh, it's a guy with a sword and he has some sex and he kills some people. Clearly this is some kind of...
it's a guy movie.
It's a guy movie, yeah.
It's a guy movie.
Again, it's a very interesting and nuanced story, and it deals with all kinds of different, themes and whatnot. Like, again, the thing with Valerian and him, when they're having their sexy time. But her whole again, to go back to the darkness and the preciousness of life and that sort of Dark Ages middle ages thing where she's talking about love and she's talking about companionship and how difficult it is and how hard it is to find, and that's true in any age. Let's just be honest. But she's there's a series of things that come up in Arnold's Conan's adventure where he's being told, don't pursue the revenge, right?
Right.
Even in getting the mission to save the girl, right? Her father's going, dude, you got a girlfriend, have some babies and go find yourself a nice little quiet corner of Samaria and to settle down and farm, right? I mean,
Right.
he doesn't explicitly say that, but he's giving you a speech about parenting or
Right.
about being a parent and the love of a parent. She's giving him the speech about connection and love and warmth and all these things. And he's laser focused on the revenge piece. Even when they get to the castle, Subadai and Valerian and the guy are all, and the sorcerer guy are all like, "Don't do it, dude. Just go get the girl, get out, get your money." And he's like sharpening his sword and he just looks at everybody, right? And what happens, right? His little fellowship gets broken up. His girlfriend gets killed, right? He completes his mission and then finds out that he has absolutely no reason to be alive at the end of this movie. He has no purpose in the world. He has no reason to be alive because everything he's geared himself for, his reward is also his undoing, right?
Yeah.
And it's just great. I mean, that scene where he's sitting there, everybody's like, "Oh, it's Arnold the Thinker," and you're like, well, yeah, he's sitting there on the stairs of this burning, temple, and he's like, "I've destroyed everything in my life that's given me purpose. And now I got to figure out what I wanted to be when I grow up."
Yeah, and the irony is that in some ways, Milius was able to elevate that character beyond its origins.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of ways, even though it never had the emotional heft, the way George Lucas was able to elevate the Saturday morning series, at least in the first Star Wars, if you view it as just one movie, it's like he was able to take it and elevate it. Even though it's mostly visually jacked up and stuff like that, there's not as much emotional heft. I would say Conan probably has more to teach a person than the original Star Wars. I mean, the complexity in the Zen Buddhism shows up in Empire and stuff. So, but it's that, yeah. It's again, I'm belaboring this point that there is more than to meet the eye, and there's a lot of, like I said, it's the music and. I just wish, then this is more like kind of a nitpick, is I just wish that it was presented better on home video. The DVD is atrocious.
Yeah, the DVD is pretty bad, and I just bought the same set on Blu-ray, so I don't know how much better.
Yeah.
I haven't watched it yet on the Blu-ray, and I'm hoping that the transfer is a little better, but it's kind of grainy and bad, and it's unfortunate because if you took that movie and you did post digital age revamp and clean up like they've done to for example, Star Wars movies and things like that, if you went back and cleaned that bad boy up, I bet you it would just be gorgeous.
Yeah,
it would be fantastic.
Of course, I don't think Milius he's had some health issues, so he's probably doesn't have the access he used to either, so who knows.
Right, and who knows what he gave up. I mean,
home video's in a weird state anyway.
That's true. So, The Destroyer.
How do you attract a man? What I mean is, suppose you set your heart on somebody. What would you do to get him?
Grab him and take him.
You grab him and take him.
Take him. Like that.
What did she mean?
What did she say?
Well, she said that if she wanted a man, she'd reach out and take him.
Good idea.
But then what? I mean, you've got him. What do you do with him?
That's easy. You see, you see, in order for a man to really know a woman, and for her to know him, they have to join.
Join.
Get together. You see, he has to take his and grab her by the, there you are. Join. I mean, how do you think flowers grow?
Well, after that lovely assessment of Conan the Barbarian, it feels a little
Anticlimactic.
to go into the Destroyer, but we want to get fantasy Arnold.
That's right.
Well, I mean, the thing about that, with when Arnold signed this deal to develop this Conan franchise that never really happened, is that like his personal goal, according to his autobiography, was he wanted to be $1 million guy. He wanted to make $1 million a film, which is, unheard of
at the time.
And I guess earlier I said that Conan the Barbarian came out in 80. It came out in 82. So he signed like a
4 or 5 picture deal.
Yeah, it was like
De Laurentiis.
Yeah, De Laurentiis. The first one he got paid $500,000 for Conan the Barbarian, and also it had a development. It was a 5-year gestational period of that, and it was supposed to be like a movie every couple years, and it took a while. And so by the time that Conan the Barbarian had come out, Arnold had started to kind of he started getting offers. So he had kind of worked out. He wanted to do the Terminator, I guess. So he had to come to some agreement with Dino De Laurentiis about this, and he said something like, well, I want to make other films, but you have me under contract. I can only work for you. So they came to some agreement so he could make the Terminator, but he had to make the Destroyer first. So it was already under kind of a time crunch or something.
It was a very short development. And from what I understand, the shooting of the film was also pretty quick. It was Red Sonja that went longer than it should have because they kept rewriting his part.
Right, yeah, and they did all this kind of hinky stuff with Schwarzenegger. So yeah, they also, I think Destroyer, I forget. I mean, Barbarian was filmed in I forget where it was filmed. Spain, but
yeah.
but Destroyer was filmed in Mexico.
Yes,
it was actually simultaneously, I guess. David Lynch's Dune was being filmed in that area, which is another Dino De Laurentiis. Well, actually, Rafaela, his daughter, produced Dune, but
she also produced The Destroyer.
Yeah, right. So they're like these two productions working at the same time, which is kind of funny. It's the irony is obviously Dino had some kind of relationship with Max von Sydow, because it's like he jumps from Barbarian to Dune, and then same thing with what's his name? Was it Paul Smith, the guy who plays Raban?
Mm-hmm.
Is in. He's obviously in Red Sonja. But yeah, again, it's by this time, after 5 years of development, I mean, movies have already changed. Now we're 2 Star Wars and an Indiana Jones into.
Shit, we're 3 Star Wars in.
Oh God,
this
we
one,
are. We're 3 Star Wars in.
Destroyer came out the same year as Return of the Jedi, 84, right?
No, Jedi came out in 83.
83, so it was a year after.
Yeah, so it had already
had 3 Star Wars, yeah.
So yeah, it's that thing that problem now that there's now, it's the funny thing is that Arnold and Milius kind of created a genre, which then again, it's like, then it kind of, Terminator and even stuff that he wasn't in, say like, First Blood and this thing, the action hero genre is in its infancy. But in the strange thing, simultaneously, there's another genre coming, which is the kid-focused, not high concept, but high budget blockbuster. So it's this weird. He's kind of, and I think that's part of the problem that happens with Destroyer, is it going to be an action movie like the first one, or is it going to be more like a kid-friendly thing because you want to get as many butts? Because they were already coming into that issue where PG and R, there was this huge gulf.
Right.
Everybody knows that, thanks to Steven Spielberg. I called up Jack Valenti and said, we need to come up with a new rating. Which, honestly, that's kind of part of the reason I've never really been in love with Steven Spielberg, because it's like, you fucked my childhood up, because all of a sudden I'm like 10 years old. And now there's this genre called PG-13.
Right.
Because they used to just dump all the PG stuff. It's like, Logan's Run, you got almost full frontal nudity. Jaws has got gore in it. And these are all, PG movies. I don't, obviously the Star Wars movies, there's arms being chopped off and things like that. And all of a sudden Spielberg comes in and creates this PG-13 thing. And now it's like, and of course my parents were like, well, you're not 13, you're not going.
Yeah.
But I
the
guess
struggle is real.
but that's that weird thing because there was a lot of that, what's acceptable, because there was that weird gulf of, and Destroyer kind of got, because it's rated PG, right?
Yes.
But it's it's a hard PG. Is
it though?
Well, it's not as hard to say Logan's Run or Jaws,
Right.
but it's kind of pushing up. I don't know. Maybe it was. I don't know much about if there was cuts or anything like that. There's some gore and there's some weird.
Very little though.
But yeah,
There's
lot
some
of
weird themes. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's nothing like overt.
So Milius wasn't available to write or direct. So I forget who wrote the script. Do you have who that?
I don't.
But the guy that
I don't.
The guy that directed it. Now I don't. I moved my phone so it wouldn't interact. He had been known for doing. He had been a big deal like 30 years ago or something. But at this point, he was kind of just looking for a gig, and it kind of shows that it almost like the movie devolves, it immediately devolves to being kind of like, the 7 Voyages of Sinbad or whatever, kind of.
I don't even think it was that good.
Well, I mean, just the fact that it's kind of cheesy. But again, that was
it became super cheese.
Yeah,
and I think so. There's a couple of things going on with the movie that I find really annoying, and one is Grace Jones.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And Grace Jones, this was around the same time of View to a Kill.
Right.
So there was a deal where the directive was Arnold Schwarzenegger was on this 5-picture deal. He did the 2 Conans, it was a 4-picture deal. 2 Conans, Red Sonja, and Raw Deal were all De Laurentiis.
Right.
And they were going to make another Conan movie in 1987.
Yeah, it was like King Conan.
Or Conan the Conqueror. Yeah. But he was on the hook to do Predator. And so they considered I think De Laurentiis bought him out, or they voided the contract or whatever. So he was no longer on the books at De Laurentiis production. That pre-production, though, that was done for Conan the Conqueror became Kull the Conqueror. So that movie became Kull, okay? But the thing that was going on, like you say, we had this, we're going to do it for the, kind of make it a fun kid movie or a action adventure film for kids, or for, making a non-offensive action adventure film or fantasy, swords and fantasy. And you have Grace Jones, who is a very popular thing at that time. She was a going concern. She was a model. She was
it was like she was
films.
she was almost like, she'd have been an Instagram star or something.
Right. And wasn't she even making music at the time too?
Yeah. She did she was Demolition Man. She did a cover of a Police song, because she was kind of like this electro. I mean, she's from Jamaica, so it was kind of like this weird electro futuristic dub reggae synth pop thing.
That actually sounds interesting.
Yeah.
But she was like this thing. She was the hot thing, right, at that moment, right? And then you had Wilt Chamberlain, right, who had just retired from basketball.
Yeah.
And was wanting to get into filmmaking.
I'd like to get into some movies, please.
Well, I mean, he was an Airplane, right?
No.
Oh, no, that was Kareem.
Yeah, Kareem.
Right. Yeah. Sorry. Basketball players, not my sport. Anyway, so he's a name, he's a household name, and you're talking about butts and seats, right? So we're going to do a thing, we're going to make a summer blockbuster. It's going to have this guy from Terminator that we all loved, right? And this guy from basketball that we all loved, and this lady who's like the hot new thing in Hollywood that we all love. We're going to put them together, and it's going to be awesome, right?
Right.
And it sucked.
Right.
And a lot of it has to do with the writing. A lot of it has to do with the way it was filmed. And the guy you're talking about, it just came to me, the guy who was I don't know if he was the director, but he was the director of photography. was the guy who had directed or was the director of photography on the Africa Queen with Humphrey Bogart.
Yeah. Let me just grab the thing and just keep.
Yeah. So we have this, this weird thing where we're trying to make Ocean's 11 in a way, right? We're trying to take this movie, we're trying to take all these popular characters from outside of film, and we're going to try and smash them all together in this movie, and it's going to be a great ensemble piece, and it's going to be like a road buddy film, and it just failed miserably, and partially because of the context of the movie in and of itself. Like, you started out, it's almost like it's reverse MASH. Okay, so MASH was a rated R movie, very deep, very dark film, very good, and they're like, we're gonna make a sitcom out of it. And in just in that moment, think about that for a minute. You're sitting there in a room, you're pitching this to an executive. You know that movie that's about suicide and drug use and like all that other shit? We're going to make a sitcom out of it. The kids are going to love it. And you're like, what? What are you talking about? And sure as shit, it worked. And it's one of the most beloved TV franchises of all time. It was a fantastic show, but it was not the movie.
Right. I mean, that was almost a process, though, because like the first couple episodes of MASH, they did retain some of the stuff, and it's like, whoa.
And this is on Tuesdays at 7?
Yeah.
Like what?
And they quickly dispense with it, but
right.
yeah.
But so what we got was a similar thing, but without the success. We got this thing where it's like, that really awesome blood and guts, swords and sorcery movie that we made? Well, we're going to make it PG, and we're going to, make it for the kids.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, probably shouldn't call it that, right? It probably should be Dungeons and Dragons, the cartoon. Let's just leave it at that, and let's not try and do a thing, because they completely abandon what made the first movie so successful. There's no deep, meditation on anything. It's a series of adventures.
It's like your princess is in another castle kind of stuff.
It's a horizontally scrolling video game, right? Go assault the castle, fight the boss, save the princess, and then we have these really anyway. The fact that the worst and biggest failure in that film is the thief dude. They replaced Subutai with the other guy. Yeah, and that actor, he'd been in so many things originally, and I don't think the characterization was going to be any different. Apparently, David Lander, who people would know from Laverne and Shirley as, Mr. Squiganowski. Right.
He was supposed to, but he had got diagnosed with MS or something, and he had to drop out. But that guy, he's
terrible.
He plays that weasel character in about 50 different movies. It's like that from 79 to 80 or something, or 79 to 90. It was like he played a weasel in 15 different movies, and he played that character over and over. It's kind of like, I think I made a joke about maybe on another episode about that actor Leland Orser, who was in Alien 4. The fact that he always just screams, that's his whole thing.
Right.
And this guy I forget his name. It's like Terry or something, or
is it Tracy?
Tracy, that's it. And he plays kind of a
Tracy Walter.
Tracy Walter. And he's like, he just plays kind of like a weird little squirrely dude. It's kind of,
well, so
hey, you gotta join. You join.
Yeah, and then a guy shows and then he grabs her in the. Oh wait, am I Trump? Oh, sorry. So, which he actually says, grabs her by and then he stops, and I was like, oh my god. Anyway, so his character, again, a lot of these things just don't fit, right?
Right.
Subutai, right, his buddy from the first movie, he's a thief, he's a scoundrel, but he's a man, right? Mm-hmm. He fights, he stands up for himself, food for wolves, but he does his thing, right? He goes to battle. He doesn't shy away from the fight. Conan says, we're gonna take the castle. He's like, sweet, let's get over that wall. This dude is supposed to be a companion and a thief with Arnold. Arnold's supposed to be a thief, which I don't really. Again,
it's kind of a strange.
It's a bad carryover.
Going back
Right. He starts out as a thief because he's doesn't know anything else but strength, right? He's been on the wheel of pain. He's really, like I said, he's released into the world, and now he's out like, well, how am I going to pay for the my Stygian habit, right? I'm up to 2 sticks a week of Stygian, man. How am I going to pay for this, right? So he robs some shit, right? Great. But then he gets purpose, right? And he gets after, and maybe, maybe not. But at the end of the first movie we were talking about, he's contemplating his role in the universe and where he's going to go from here and all that kind of stuff. And I would like to think that when he takes, Osric's daughter back, that maybe he does find, like, maybe I will be an adventurer. I'm no longer going to be a thief. I'm going to be a man of honor or whatever. I'll fight for money. I'll be a mercenary, but I'm going to be a man of honor, whatever. You don't know, right? But it is implied things that his character has grown. Now we find him praying for his ex-girlfriend to come back from the dead, to Crom. And then we've got this whiny, snivelly little rat fink dude. He's just a piece of shit. He hides and he's, I'm whiny and I'm whiny. I didn't think we made the man that mad. It's like, well, we took all of his stuff. It's like, oh, you broke into his house. You took all his shit. Of course he's going to be mad. Like,
He's Jar Jar Binks.
He is. But he doesn't look as cool as Jar Jar Binks.
Exactly.
Right? And he doesn't have, like, the miso street gritty. But he's just, and every single line he delivers is very whiny and dry, and he's always kind of looking off screen. Well, I guess we'll go find the princess. Yeah,
it's like,
and then every single scene, they're like, we got to go assault the bad guys and get the thing, and he's like, oh, do it without me.
Yeah,
go ahead without me, and then they all ride off, and he's like, hey, wait, guys, you need me. And he's like, it's like, yeah.
Oh, you know who he is? He's like, God, what was that? Did you ever watch? God, it was a cartoon in the 70s. That was a.
You're talking about the
Gulliver's Travels.
Gulliver's Travels.
We're not gonna make it.
We're all gonna die.
That kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that character. It's oh God, and which is like a weird thing around that era. It was like, oh, let's throw
Crybaby Smurf or whatever.
Yeah, let's throw a whiny little punk ass into things, because that was like. That's one of the things that Lucas again. This becomes like everything is just compared to Star Wars in my life.
It's important.
It's kind of glad. I'm kind of glad he waited until the 90s to throw in that kind of annoying character. It's like maybe he never saw Conan the Destroyer. Maybe he just said like, oh, maybe that's not a good idea. Oh well.
Or maybe he saw it.
Or maybe he'd be like,
I can make this better. I'm gonna call it Phantom Menace.
I'm gonna do that
faster, more intense.
Oh. Anyway, it's the casting's weird. I mean, Grace Jones is kind of one of those things where I kind of liked her only because I thought she was like, there's something, she scared the shit out of me when I was a kid.
But she is a scary thing to look at. That's true.
I mean, but she's
shouting and screaming.
But I mean,
at
she's
you with
scary,
her
but
crew cut.
she's like kind of beautiful, scary, and the fact that she's just so intense and into it. But unfortunately, because of the way the story is set up, like the character has very little dignity. It's just like, you take him and grab him
and take him.
And it's like, she's not a very good actress. And it's kind of like, again, I keep thinking of that In Living Color sketch that, I forget. She was one of the Wayans. She was one of the Wayans sisters. She would play Grace Jones, and she would just knock down walls and grab people. Do you find me sexy?
Grab him.
And she would grab the guy and drag, and that was like that was comedy back then. But no, it's a weird movie because there's a lot of
it's a series of vignettes.
Well, one they have like this. They literally have like a 15-year-old virgin as a plot point, and it's
13.
Yeah, is she 13 in the movie?
She was so that's Dabo.
Yeah, she was really young.
She was 13 when they made that movie.
I was watching that and I was like, oh yeah, because I remember being a kid and going, oh, Olivia Dabo, she was so hot. And then I'm like watching it now, I'm like, she's a child.
No.
She's a child.
Well, not in real life. IRL, baby.
But she was like 15 or 13 or 15. It's like, so that ruined it for me in watching.
Well, that's an interesting thing because I didn't realize she was that young.
Yeah.
Right. And I was watching an interview with her much later. She was at some Comic-Con in England, and this was just recently. And she was talking, or in the last couple of years, and she was talking about like she was on Buffy or whatever, I guess.
Okay,
but was it Buffy?
Well,
no.
She was on the Wonder Years. If that's
well, she was on Wonder Years too, yeah. But she was talking about maybe it was the Wonder Years. She was talking about how something had finally gone on Netflix and all that stuff. Anyway, they were talking about what was it like to work with Arnold Schwarzenegger. She's like, oh, it was great, and all this stuff. And we get everybody up at 5 a.m. to go to the gym and all this stuff. He's like, get out, we got to work out, but. She, in passing, had said, it was really great, being a 13-year-old and being in my first movie. And I'm thinking, wait, stop. How does this even conform to child labor laws? Like,
right.
How are you even getting paid for this? Like, your parents are cashing the checks? Like, what's all that about? And then the fact, like you say, the plot point is she's going to be sacrificed because she's a virgin. And she's riding around, and one of the subplots is her trying to figure out how to seduce Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's old enough to be her dad, right? And
he's already deep into his 30s at this point.
Yeah, and it's like, and the whole thing, and then at the end she's like, rule the kingdom with me and like bed me, and I'm like, ugh. Holy fuck balls! Like I didn't even realize. So I'm thinking like, okay, so it's Hollywood. So she's like all Hollywood shows. It's like 90210. It's a bunch of 30-year-olds playing 15-year-olds.
Right?
No, it's the other way around. It's like a 13-year-old playing a 30-year-old. I'm like, oh my god, it's kind of freaky. But
and that it becomes this kind of landmine of like just and. One thing I'll say, I hadn't watched the movie in a while, so I'm watching it, and so the DVD's crap. So I actually had to sit through the commercials on Crackle or whatever, the app, and I watched it that way because it's in high def at least.
All right. Yeah.
So it's the first time I've seen the movie probably in scope, meaning like in widescreen.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this really like odd scene where she's having her nightmare. Where she goes, it happened again. It happened again. It was like, it's there. It's terrifying or something. And at the way the cinematographer did, Wilt Chamberlain's crotch is in the far right of the frame the whole time she's talking. It's just his crotch. And so it's like it creates this weird visual line where you think she's talking about his, like he was, junk, maybe he was like hitting her in the face with his ding-a-ling or something. And you're like, what the fudge? Who the hell?
It is Wilt Chamberlain.
Yeah, so. Who the hell? Yeah, I know. He had his reputation of bedding 10,000 women. And it's just like... and
ironically, he's the one that's supposed to protect her.
Yeah,
in the movie.
It's like there's like this weird kind of like... and again, I guess that's been reused. And like, where did I see that whole thing? Oh, the Scorpion King. Did you ever see the Scorpion King?
Did not.
The Rock. There's a whole subplot with another... I mean, it's kind of a, obviously fantasy has this, only a virgin can activate this horned demon or whatever, but everything about the story feels like it's a step backwards, and
it does. It one of the things that I walked away from that movie. So one of the things it's another movie that shows up on TV all the time, and it's not one that I'm particularly fond of, obviously, but it's on in the background, and I see bits and bobs of it, but this. Recently, when we decided to do this show, I was like, I'm going to sit down and watch all these movies, in totality, one, back to back or whatever. I have not watched The Destroyer all the way through, I don't think, in probably 10, 15 years, right? So I sat down and watched the whole thing, and I wanted to kill myself by the time it was over. But the whole thing, the whole feeling that I got when I walked away from it was, this is why I quit the D&D club in junior high.
Yeah.
Right? Bad dungeon mastering. Okay? Terrible DMing. The story was crap. It was like, okay, so the virgin has to go get a thing, and then she has to bring it back and do a thing. That's a 10-minute movie that we got in the 2 hours, right? Or hour and a half, whatever. But it's like, it felt like a bunch of short little things stitched together to try and elongate it into a full-length movie.
Yeah, and
like going and getting Mako or whatever, the sorcerer guy, and going and picking up Grace Jones at the village, like completely unnecessary to the entire movie. The only purpose...
they could have all shown up already a team. We don't.
Right.
I mean, it's nice in Barbarian, because it's an origin story, to kind of get an idea. Oh, this is how he met his crew, because it's a line through. But they could absolutely have just started it with like, oh, he's hanging out with these 4 people right now.
Right.
And it doesn't really matter. And it's like, then they could have taken that energy and put it into the matter at hand rather than this, you know, elongated origin story for her where she has to like, you know, they're going to kill her. Or something. No, she has a stick or something. Some village is going to kill her. And then
she came and raided their village, or she was part of a group.
Yeah.
And again, you want to talk about bad Ryan Johnson-esque plot lines. So she was part of a group of raiders who came to their village, right?
Right.
Killed off a bunch of dudes. They killed her entire crew except for her, and now she's going to be publicly executed, right? Yet she has a weapon. She's fighting people. Yeah, they've got her chained to the rock or whatever, but the fact is, like, why does she have a weapon? And why is she being allowed to fight? Like, and why are they trying to fight her? You know, doesn't anybody own a bow and arrow in this town? Like, can't they just shoot her in the head? Like, anyway, very bad. But then, of course, Conan and his eternal sense of justice, he's like, I'm going to give you a fair fight. And he cuts her thing and lets her run rampant through the town, and she just escapes. And then pledges her loyalty to him, and I will ride with Conan forever, and I will grab him and take him.
And that's another weird thing is that all of a sudden now people pledge fealty to him.
Right.
It's like Subotai never did that.
No.
Mako never did that in the first movie. Is he supposed to play the same dude?
He's the same dude, yeah.
So, and it's almost the interaction. It's like they don't know each other because he helps him and then he goes, I need you. And then goes, I'm yours. And it's just like, oh.
Yeah. The dialogue there is very strange. And then the whole thing, the whole going to like, so we're at the princess's castle. We've just got the story. She's the virgin with the mark, and she's the only one who can handle the dong that goes in the head of the guy that turns him into, you know, the big horny jeweled thing that she's supposed to get. Whatever, you know.
The jeweled double donger from Requiem for a Dream.
That's right. There you go. It's so phallic and bad. Anyway, I mean, Freud is over there sucking on a cigar, going, "Da, jeez,
this is crazy.
This is crazy. You love your father. Your father have no problems." So they're at this castle. They get the story about the chick, and then they go on the journey. And Arnold is like, gets to this one spot in the woods, and he's like, I am going left. I must find my friends. And you're like, so why is he not with you at the beginning of the movie? Right? He's a carryover character from the first movie. Right? You clearly have had adventures together. Like, you know the dude. So, like, what he left your crew, like Subotai left your crew, but now you need a wizard, so you're going to go. Like, I would be rolling deep with a wizard all the time, right? Because you never know when you're going to come across a witch in the woods.
He's the Swiss Army guy of the Hyborian age.
Well, you never know when you're going to roll up on a thing, and some girl's going to tell you about Zamora and the crossroads of the world, and you're like, oh shit! I mean, I need a sorcerer right now, right? Like, this chick is crazy, you know. So I don't get like that whole thing, but it's so like, again, it's very convenient, you know. Oh, we're just rolling through the woods, and if you go right, you go get the horned jewel thing, and if you go left, you get to go pick up the wizard, and it's like, again, bad DMing, right?
It's everything happens because reasons.
Yeah,
which is exactly the problem with, you know, The Last Jedi is everything happens because reasons.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's no I mean, even like when the I forget her name, but the Sarah Douglas, the evil witch or whatever.
Oh, the queen,
evil queen.
Yeah,
it's like the only thing they could have done interesting was to save the double cross until like maybe the third act, but you know going into it that like Bombada is gonna stab it completely ruins it. Like that never should have even come up until they should have cut the sequence where she tells Bombada that, you know, oh, kill Conan. They should have just like cut that out.
Right.
There should have been some question. There might have been some tension. It's like, well, is Bombada got an agenda? Is that why they got in this thing? Or was it, you know, they just, any chance to make the story even a skosh interesting, they just undercut it. They just, you know, it's like, oh no, I'd much rather play House of Mirrors with the Crystal Wizard. And it's like, and honestly, their quest isn't even that interesting. Once they all get together, it's literally like they ride their horses, they get in some fights, they get to the crystal thing, they get the horn, and then they come back, right? I mean, isn't that the whole?
Well, so they get the jewel from the castle to go to the place with the horn, again, this is just such bad DMing. It's like you say, it's reasons. So they go to the mirror castle in the lake because there's a stone there, and the stone is the key that opens the mouth to the thing where you can grab the horn. And then you bring the horn back and you put it in the dude's forehead, and then if you kill the girl right at the moment that he shows life, he becomes this gorgeous man with a big dong on his forehead. And then the queen's gonna have her man, right? And he's gonna be beautiful.
What is she just? She's just gonna have like this man? Is there some supernatural dude?
Wait, so again, is
it gonna be like the alien baby where they bring the baby and then the thing like they caress it and then it knocks somebody's head off? It's just like
I don't know. You see, so I went and tried to find some critical analysis of this film, which is hilarious because there really isn't any because nobody cares.
There is now.
These motherfuckers right here, two dudes.
So,
but the thing is, like, a lot of people misunderstand the scene. So when they get the horn and they're coming out of that temple, there's all the guys show up and they're all wearing black, and the guy's like, "Please hand over the horn." And he's like, "Why?" And he's like, "Well, we are the guardians, and we are serve whatever his name is, horn god, right?
The horn god,
right?" And so they're talking about when he comes back and he's going to destroy and rule the world and all this stuff. The priest guy makes the comment that they would be able to control him if he were to come back, right? And they've been waiting. Their religion has been waiting for this, the second coming of the horny beast, because they're not a woman, they can't touch the dong, right? And so all that, which it's funny when you talk about telling the story at the beginning, like we get the origin story of the virgin like 3 times told over again. She says it to Conan and herself and whoever's listening, and then they talk about the horny thing, and remember, only a woman can touch it, right? Which is a theme that comes out again in Red Sonja, which is even more explicit. But the whole thing, we get told like 7 times, and then these guys come along and they're like, well, we're the priests that guard the horn, and when he comes back, we're going to have control. And Arnold's like, well, my friend, the only guy in our group who can read, says that he read the thing on the wall, and it said that it's going to destroy the world and all stuff. And he's like, oh, silly little man, we can control him. I think what the queen was trying to do is that she was trying to be the one to control this god, right? And supposedly, I guess, if you follow the logic of the conversations that they're having, whoever awakes the god, if they follow the
it's going to imprint on you and it'll be yours forever.
Right. I am for you, Ulrika Volt.
Yeah, it's like a fawn.
Yeah,
it's the first thing it sees.
Right. Are you my mommy? Yeah, I am. So I guess if you follow the logic of their conversations, whichever group or individual winds up awaking this god, if they follow the forms correctly and just sacrifice the virgins and all those things, then they will have control over this very powerful deity. Well, okay, great. That just sounds like a whole lot of bullshit. Yeah, like we talked about, we have a discussion of religion in the first film. We have a false prophet, right? We have Thulsa Doom, who is a minor sorcerer or whatever, and he's created a cult around himself. And then we have technically actual, air quotes, actual religions when we talk about the Four Winds and Crom and all that stuff. But we never have interactions with the gods except for the fact that Valerian comes back from the dead. Right. But that's still not an interaction with a god, right?
Yeah, it's just a brief thing.
It's a brief thing. You want to live forever? So now we're talking about the only religious thing that we have in this movie, and not that religion has to be a big part, but if we're going to make it a religion, we're going to talk about the gods and demanded by the gods it is, right? If you're going to start talking about the gods in the movie, we need something better than, this marble statue that's in my house, right? Where are these? So let's just talk about that for a second. If these priest dudes at the temple are like, we're the keepers of the horny horn,
which sounds like a Rush.
Yeah.
We are the keepers of the horny devil. It does.
It's so true. It's so true. Oh, man.
I'm
Is that
sure,
on Moving Pictures?
I'm sure Neil Peart was like, this movie, it's like, screw Ayn Rand.
Right.
It's Conan the Destroyer is my god now.
It's pretty true. So these guys are supposed to be these keepers. They're supposed to be the religious order and the armed monks who protect this thing. Yet they don't have the statue, right? So like the statue's in the lady's house, and she's like, I like to touch it. She's like, in the whole first half of the movie, she's like the Real Housewives of Middle Earth or whatever. She's like wandering around in her ballroom gown, drinking her red wine, and caressing this marble statue of this hot guy, going, "When you come alive, boy." You're like, what is going to get the pool boys made out of marble? And you got the guys are supposed to be the protectors of this religion. They don't even have all the parts to make the religion work. Right? They've got the horn, but they don't got the statue, and it's like, what the hell's going on? Anyway, it's a
build your own mythos kit.
Yeah, it is, and it's not. And somebody put it together without instructions or whatever. It's terrible.
Well, yeah, and then when the thing is reanimated,
they don't kill the girl, so then it turns into what, the Kraken?
Yeah, it turns into this thing, and then there's that really gross thing where you like laboriously pulls the horn off of it, which is like the sinew. And it's just like
it's bobitized it.
It's which is hilarious because the whole thing is like we didn't want a bunch of people getting hit with swords, so they cut all that out. But then they have this long, laborious, gross thing where the donger
blood's all running out of it.
Yeah, and it's like screaming, and it's just like, oh,
it's the big boss. It's the
well,
big
and also
thing.
it's like, well, think about and for me, it's like the year it came out. Like I'm like 11. Mm-hmm. And like I got teeth coming out of my head every couple months, so it's like that uncomfortable.
It's like a bad dentist visit.
It's like this uncomfortable feeling about like watching somebody get like a tooth or horn pulled out of their head as you've got teeth coming out of your head, and it's just like, oh, I mean, I'm like you. I hadn't seen the movie in a long time because I'd seen it a million times on Cinemax when I was a kid because that was my Conan. It wasn't like I had it was that and the Beastmaster bouncing between bouncing Beastmasters or whatever.
Which is the name of my new band.
Yeah,
Bouncing Beastmasters.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we could bring Sonja into, unless you have more stuff just about the Destroyer you want to say.
Well, it's just the Destroyer thing. One of the interesting things, so we had talked about how Conan, and this also bridges over to Red Sonja, but one of the interesting things about this whole thing was it was supposed to be, as we said, this multi-picture concept, and every couple of years we're dropping a new Conan, and there is a core ensemble of actors that show up in every movie. Like Ole or Sven Ole.
Yeah, Sven Ole Thorsen.
He's in all of them.
Yes.
So like they have this very interesting fight. Conan and him, but he's wearing a helmet and has a beard.
Oh wait, are you sure that's not? Is Sven in that? Because there's another guy, the guy that played what's his name? Oh, it's
Sven Ole Thorsen was
Pat Roach.
No, Pat Roach was Lord Brightag in Red Sonja.
Oh, okay, but he's in this too.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
No, so Sven was Thorgrim in he was Thorgrim in Barbarian, which was one of the two guys. There was the football player and him. He was the dude with the big hammer, right? And then in this movie, so in Destroyer, he was Togra.
Yeah, okay.
Who is one of the guards that attacks them after she gets the horn.
Oh, yeah, and then he goes, I thought you were going to hurt the girl.
Right. That guy that he kills, that's him.
Right.
And I was watching it, I was like, man, that guy's eyes look familiar. And then I go and I look at the cast list. I'm like, fuck, that's my boy. He also shows up in Red Sonja.
Right.
He gets killed down in the officers' quarters at the Queen's Castle. He's another guy in a helmet who gets chopped, right? And the same thing goes for, I guess not all three movies, but Sandahl Bergman, she's obviously the evil queen in Red Sonja, and she's Valerian in
right.
The Conan. It's like, but it's interesting because I feel like this is part of that failed plan of making multiple films. Like we signed all these people to deals,
and then
now we got to use them, but we kill them. Like we put a hat on Oli, and then kill him off, and then we put a beard on him, and then we kill him off. We're like, that's a totally different character. You're like, well, it's the dude, it's the same guy,
Yeah, it's also kind of weird that Sandal Bergman effectively plays that same character that Sarah Douglas plays in Destroyer. I mean, and it's almost like her acting talent has kind of taken 2 steps back in the interim, because by the time Red Sonja is out, it's just like, I mean, I don't know. The thing about Red Sonja is that I don't understand that movie at all. Like I watched it twice, and then I realized I've never seen that movie all the way through until like about 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's the worst Dungeons and Dragons adventure you'll ever go on. It's junior high grade. Dungeon Mastery.
Well, I remember, like, I'd read some Red Sonja comics and stuff, and it's like Brigitte Nielsen was so not what I had in my mind about her. It was just like
Sandal Bergman would have been a better.
Yeah, absolutely. It could have put a red wig on her, and
dyed her hair or whatever. She would have been fine. Like, I think that. So, Red Sonja. We'll just move in. We'll kind of cross back and forth. But Red Sonja is another character created by Howard,
right?
And separate and independent of Conan.
Okay.
Right. I shouldn't say that. I don't know if she was a crossover character or a minor character in a Conan, but she was a character created by him who got her own life, had her own comics and her own, pulp stuff, and basically a female version of Conan, right? It comes from adversity, is a great warrior, no man is her equal, like all that stuff, right? So again, great concept, great idea. If we had done the whole multi-picture deal thing better, it would have been interesting, though it would have completely altered the first film. If Red Sonja shows up in Conan's world and becomes his companion, who ultimately they conquer and, trod on the jeweled crowns of Aqueous and all that stuff, right? That would have been interesting. But they set up the Valerian character to be this great love interest and this great pinnacle of desire for him, that it almost became like bringing Red Sonja into the Conan universe. I don't know if it would have worked, because especially after Destroyer, like they built up the need for Valeria so much that he's willing to look the other way. Virgins being sacrificed if it means getting his girlfriend back.
Yeah, he jumps right in on it. It's like he's learned nothing.
Right.
From
he's still naive as shit.
The snake magic guy that promised him bullshit, and it's not real, and it's all smoke and mirrors. Yet by this movie, he's not sticking it out with Jerry Lopez or whatever. Maybe he's a package deal with Milius, but it's
surfing buddies.
Yeah, he immediately he goes, "How do you sign me up?" Kind of thing, and it's just like, okay, that's the motivation. I remember even reading in the book, and it just being very matter of fact, like, I can bring your wife back or your girlfriend back. Okay.
Right.
And you're just like, well,
there's no questioning.
This is a,
they try and make it, in Destroyer, they try and make it look like, well, not very well, but they try to show it as her casting a spell on him. Right. Because she's like, look at the altar. What is it that you desire? What is in the heart of hearts or whatever? And she sees Valerian burning, and he sees Valerian burning. And then when she says, I can bring her back, I can do all this stuff. She then says, awake and remember, right? So it's like, so it's some cheap parlor trick where I hypnotized you into thinking I can do all this stuff. Anyway, again, very bad, very poorly done. Oh, and the thing that we got off track on, but really quickly about Destroyer, was when all those guys show up at that temple, the priest and all of his guards in black, they do a thing where they say, they're talking about taking the horn and bringing the god back, and then Conan and Wilt Chamberlain, they all fight those guys. And a lot of people that I've seen, or read the reviews of the movie, they're like, why are they fighting the Queen's Guards? It's the same thing. They all go into the same place. They're all going back to the same castle with the same. And it's not. It's just the costuming was so close and similar and so bad that everybody who works at the castle looks like just like the guys who work down at the shrine or whatever. And it's like, no, you needed a different color or a different aesthetic because it confuses the audience. So anyway, the same thing kind of, the Red Sonja deal. It's like you talk about it's recycling a lot of the aesthetic, and it doesn't make any sense as a story. The whole origin of Red Sonja is crap.
Well, and they did some weird thing where it looks like they filmed kind of a very similar to the Conan the Barbarian intro, where the village is vanquished and the village is burned by the queen. Isn't she befouled or something? There's some scene where it looks like she's being assaulted, or is it somebody?
Oh, yeah, she's raped. Yeah,
yeah. And then didn't they? But don't they turn around this stuff about then they go? I don't know. It's like they start going, no man can have her, and
right. So
it's just becomes this weird commoditization or something.
Yeah.
Of her.
So the way it starts is, she's laying there on the grass, right? Well, yeah. So she's laying there on the grass, and her house is burning, right? Perfectly good cabin in the woods is on fire, and it's implied. So this ghosty thing, right? This weird white apparition. It's like, Sonja, and it wakes her up, right?
Yeah.
It says, you were just raped, and your family was just murdered, and you'll need strength for your revenge. And out comes this glowing sword thing and taps her on the forehead. Bring! Disney princess, guess what? You have all the magics and all the power because reasons, right?
Because reasons.
And she's like, looks off, and she puts her arms up in the air, and then it's music's. And then it's Conan, right, riding through the woods. But
whatever.
But it's Calidor.
Calidor.
I am Calidor.
I am contractually obligated to be called Calidor.
Calidor is actually Sumerian for contractually obligated.
Calidor, take me away.
Exactly. Oh my God. So anyway, so then she goes off to learn the sword fighting from the masters in the East again, right? And this is where everybody refers to it as a part of the Conan trilogy or calls it a trilogy because it really is. It's a Conan movie that got reworked.
It's not released and it's not part of the full adventure box set.
I know it's not, but it's so.
Actually, you can't get Red Sonja on Blu-ray in this country.
No, you can't. You're right. I to do the research for this, I had to buy it, and I bought it on DVD, and I was disappointed as shit that I couldn't get it on Blu-ray. Anyway. Because there is still one of my favorite lines of all time in film is in Red Sonja, and it's really not worth sitting through 2 hours of it just for that line, but whatever. So the whole thing is she goes off and she does the sword fighting thing, and there's all this talk about like she kicks the ass out of the guy who's supposedly the best sword fighter in the school, and he like goes to congratulate her and give her a hug, and she's like, "Step the fuck back! I don't like boys," even though. In the beginning of the movie, she's disgusted by the fact that the queen wants to get sexy time with her, right? So at the beginning of the movie, when the Sonja is giving her the flashbacks, it shows the queen like gripping on her and like rubbing on her and shit, and so she grabs an axe and cuts her face, and so then she sicks all of her warriors on her to rape the shit out of her, and then later on in the movie, we find that the queen thought that she was also burned to death in the building, but she wasn't, right? So whatever. So we've got this weird thing going now with Sonja where she clearly hates men because of what happened, but she's also not a lesbian because clearly she pushed back on the queen and her advances, but then it turns out, no, she just needs to be domesticated by Calidor.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, oh, come on.
And the worst thing is that the whole point of that character is that she's like this fiery female that's on par with Conan, you know?
Right.
And then it's like, really? It's about really? Like the whole point of this is to like make her not powerful and
exactly. It's all about domesticating her, which is so stupid because the whole it's interesting to me, I guess, but it's stupid as shit. Is that the whole premise of this movie, in this particular movie, is again we have a device, right? We have this powerful orb, glowing green thing that takes its power from the sun and candles.
It's a Yankee Candle god or whatever.
It's the I don't know. It's some solar powered tactical flashlight god. Anyway, but this thing that can only be touched by women, right? And it's protected by these priestess women who are all swords women who they have this big fight, to protect the orb, and they're kicking some ass. And Sonja's sister is one of the high priestesses who ultimately partially survives long enough to tell Galador, what's going on, and all this stuff. But it's like this movie is attempting to be a female-centric adventure film, but for whatever reason or whatever happened in the filming of it, and I'm still not really clear on what happened, because I don't know if people are under some kind of agreement not to talk about it, but Arnold was all pissed because he was supposed to have a very minor role.
Yeah, he was supposed to work like a week.
Yeah, and then he wound up being a major co-star.
Yeah, it was a favor because of that thing I said before about he wanted to do Terminator.
Right.
And he was under contract. He said, well, do me a favor, and it's cool. And he did him a favor, and then he shot everything with 3 cameras, and then turned around and editing and added him. And he was there a month even.
Right.
Which he was not planning. And then it turned around that like he used every camera angle that he could do to just extend the fact that this Galador character. So now he's on the poster, and
right, and
he's like second billing, and you're just like,
yeah.
And it's funny too because, well, I mean, it didn't do much. Even it didn't say it. I think it came and went in a week or something like that.
It wasn't. It made. I think I read something like it cost, I don't know, like 20 million, 30 million to make, and it made like 16 million at the box office. It was something like it made basically half of what it cost to make it back at the box office, whatever the numbers.
And that's what happened with Destroyer is that, I guess Schwarzenegger wasn't too hot on the idea of dumbing down Destroyer.
No. And nobody was.
And then but the first one made 40 and then the Destroyer made 30.
Right.
So it was like they kind of proved the point that that dumbing it down doesn't work. And then they dumb it down even more.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I guess that's the old Planet of the Apes way of doing things. It's like, oh, you had a successful movie. That's great. Let's just cut the budget in half for the next one, and we'll make even more money.
They did the same thing with Star Trek.
Right.
And part of the problem was because the first Star Trek movie was so wildly out of control budget-wise, and it didn't make the money back. So when they hired Nick Mayer to do the Wrath of Khan, which ultimately became the Wrath of Khan, when they hired him for the second Star Trek movie, they said, "Look, yeah, do whatever you want, but here your budget's like $50, so figure it out." And so he wrote a submarine warfare movie, right? He wrote a movie where you have 2 bridges of starships,
right.
And all they did was they took the camera and moved it and repositioned the center seat. It's the same bridge set
right.
to make 2 separate ships. Like anyway, going down that rabbit hole.
This is SETI Alpha 5.
That's right.
Sorry.
Admiral Kirk. Admiral.
I never forget a face. Mr.
Chekhov. All right. We might have to do a show on that shit, too.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, yeah.
But the whole thing was, the budgeting was terrible. It had the special. So one of the things that as we start with the high quality of Conan the Barbarian, very little CGI in that, or not CGI. They didn't have CGI. Sorry, blue screen or green screen or whatever. Very little special effect.
There's like the ghosts that try to take Conan's
ILM.
soul. Oh, it's an ILM.
ILM thing. Yep. So ILM did that. Right, and then there's the weird blue screen at the beginning, and everybody complains about that, and they're like, oh, why does Conan and his dad have to be in front of a blue screen? I think, well, if you'd actually took them up on the top of a mountain so you could get that shot with the mountain range and the clouds moving like that behind him, you wouldn't be able to hear anything they were saying, and their hair would be blowing away. And like,
there's a child, too.
Right, yeah, he doesn't just take a kid up Everest and be like, all right, just stay in here so we can get a good shot. And you're like, oh, he's dead. So anyway,
this isn't a John Landis film,
right? So, they did that, and it was great because to quote our man, Mark Hamill, real sad it's practical effects, right?
No, I thought his I enjoyed being Luke Skywalker again.
Yeah, right. He didn't say that. So, but then we got into Barbarian, and there was still real sets and practical effects, but you could tell the budget had been greatly reduced.
Right.
And there was still some shitty, special effecty things.
Like the House of Glass.
The House of Glass was terrible.
Well, the worst special effects in Sonja is that, well, we've completely forgot like Ronald Lacey is his role. I don't know what his character's name is. The guy who played Tote in Raiders. He's one of the thing. Like the sequence near the end when he gets crushed.
Yeah.
It's like all of a sudden he goes, ah, and then he runs over
and lays down
in the track of this wheel door that, and as it's crushing and he's screaming. He literally could have gotten out, went and made a sandwich, come back and died in the time that he's sitting there.
It reminds me of the scene in the Austin Powers movie with the steamroller.
Yes.
It's like, get out of the way. And he's like laying there, I'm going to be crushed. He's like, get out of the way. Like, it's like that same thing was going through my mind in that scene.
Yeah, Ronald Lacey. I mean, that guy, poor dude. He'd never. I honestly think, have you ever seen this is, you probably haven't seen it. Have you ever seen the British TV show called Man to Man with Dean Lerner?
No, I have not.
It's a British comedy, and it's really hard to explain, but basically it's two actors and one actor plays a different person every week.
Right.
And one of them, it's this whole British video nasties, like back in the day, that's what they used to call horror movies, video nasties.
Okay.
And his whole thing was that he was a B-movie actor, but people kept treating him like the characters he played. Oh, okay. And there's this thing, and I'm so sure it's supposed to be Ronald Lacey. I'll show you the thing. That's not going to be interesting. It's Randolph Kerr of Man to Man. Sometimes I forget I'm recording this. I'll put a link in the show notes.
In the comments, yeah. No, so you get that, you get these, then you get, the special effects keep getting worse and worse. Red Sonja is like a lot of really bad matte paintings, like the whole bridge with that's the skeleton, and the really bad, like, oh, Queen so-and-so's, whatever, Galedra or whatever her name is, like she's using the talisman, and it's like this bad lightning cloud thing that's clearly overlaid over a shot. It's just it's so terrible.
Well, and then she takes her mask off at the end, like, you scarred me, and then she's got like the Kylo Ren scar that's not even that bad. I mean, it's a scar for sure.
She's a very vain woman,
but she's like, oh, I'm no longer beautiful, and that's her whole whole
motivation.
It's like, I'm no longer that sexually attractive to my house slaves or something.
Yeah, the girls that she has chained to the radiator.
So, yeah, what's the point? It's like, I don't even know who wrote this damn thing.
Right.
It's kind of like...
Well, it's interesting because you say, who wrote it, or I don't think... Anyway, the motivation of the, like you say, the evil person, right? She gives a little speech at the end where the Nazi guy is saying, why are we doing this? Why are you keeping the talisman in a room with all this light? Why are you overloading its power? It's going to destroy the world. And she's like, I want the world. I want the world. And she kind of acts all crazy at the end. Like, but we sort of knew you were batshit, right? Because you're driving around in the hood and you're burning down buildings and you're butchering people and you're blowing up kingdoms and all this stuff. It's like, we already know you're crazy. But then you throw in this stupid afterthought throwaway thing where it's like, and I'm ugly too. And you're like, oh, shut up, Sander Berghall, you dirty old taking your shirt off lady. Come on. I mean, that's basically her career after this movie. Is she made a bunch of really softcore shit in Europe through the 90s. And
I know.
And then disappeared.
I actually, I was on Amazon Prime and they had like, I was looking for a free copy of Red Sonja and I found the rental. And there's other people watch and you click on it and there's like this crappy Sandal Bergman movie where she's like, it's just like girls with super teased hair in rags, and then their shirts pop off for no reason, and they're gladiators of some sort. I don't even remember the name of the damn movie.
But I watched the whole thing.
No, I didn't.
From beginning to end.
I respect her as an actress. Yes, but yeah, it's a sad state of affairs that, we talk about movies now and we get mad about The Last Jedi and like, what was Rian Johnson thinking? But this wasn't like a new thing. It was like a lot of times, the 9th movie in the series or whatever, it's like they're completely out of ideas. And sadly with the Conan thing, even though we had this litany of books and since Robert E. Howard's kind of his thing was tied into the Cthulhu mythos a little bit because he was buddies with Lovecraft, at least they were correspondents, and they all fed into that thing and was supposed to be built upon. And of course, you know, the Horn God or whatever could probably be a Cthulhu thing, but
we definitely kind of looked Cthulhu-y.
Yeah, but they
Kraken-y,
it's like they ran out of ideas to kind of like, you know, they can't go, oh well, the source material, it's, you know, it's so limited or whatever. It's like
it's not though.
They had so much they could have went with, but because it's Dino De Laurentiis and he's a bit of a, you know, crap producer, and the fact that he's just like, well, how much am I going to make? Well, if I spend $2 million more, will I make $10 million more? It's like, no, you won't. Well, then I'm not going to spend the $2 million.
Well, that was the thing. So I read, speaking of that, that's a very interesting point because I read, it was Conan the Barbarian was one of the last films that had a mono soundtrack because they didn't want to spend the extra $30,000 to make it a stereo soundtrack.
And it's always been released it's on Blu-ray. It's in mono as well. It's like it sounds the whole movie kind of sounds dated.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's so sad because again we go back and we talk about like the soundtrack in that movie is phenomenal. The sound effects are actually very well done. The sound engineering, the sounds from the fights and the chopping of heads and all that stuff, it's all fantastic. But like you say, it's flat and it feels dated because it's a mono soundtrack. But that was a directly caused by the cheapness of De Laurentiis. They did not want to spend the $30,000 extra. On a $16 million movie, you don't want to spend $30 more grand to make the soundtrack awesome or make it sound right, you know. And clearly they made the money back. They would have made the money back, you know. But now they're all, I don't want to spend that money.
It's like,
yeah, I would have spent $30,000 to get a writer for Red Sonja, right?
Right.
Please and thank you.
Why do it's like he just throws the book down on the table. No, you just to take this right out of this. Red Sonja, come right in. You take a page from the book. Don't even worry about it.
Well, the thing of like you were just saying about all the ancillary material that was laying around that they could have used or sought inspiration from. It reminds me of the Bob Marley quote, you know, in an abundance of water, the fool is thirsty. And they had all this stuff they could have used. And all it takes is, and this is the argument that they made for Rian Johnson, but it doesn't hold up to the results and the things that he's been saying. But everybody was like, well, he respects the material and he loves the franchise and he loves, you know, Star Wars or whatever. So he's going to make a great Star Wars movie. Well, the first Conan movie was made because people thought Arnold Schwarzenegger would be a great Conan. And it was made by people who were not necessarily familiar. Milius was kind of familiar with Conan.
Only in the pre-production periods,
right.
Apparently. He never read the books as a kid or anything like that.
Right, but he at least educated himself on it's like he at least sat down and read and understood it. But maybe what needs to happen in larger, and this is like a larger topic, but maybe what needs to happen in filmmaking is maybe the Muggles shouldn't be making the Harry Potter movies, and maybe the Star Wars sweaties shouldn't be making the Star Wars movies.
I've always said that. I mean, when this was a Star Wars podcast, I'm just talking for myself. It's like I don't really have like if somebody said, "Hey, go write episode 9," I'd be like, I don't have any ideas. Now, not even taking into account what's the thing. I was like, I don't. You know, maybe I look at what's existing and then I have opinions about it. But yeah, I'm like the Star Wars fan. I want to know where it's going. And I feel like, sometimes when people think that they know it better than they do, then they prove that they didn't know it at all.
Right. But at the same time, with the Conan movies, even though we had a group of people involved in making the first one who were not necessarily stewards of the character, they made themselves familiar enough with it to make a fantastic movie.
They took it seriously.
And then they somewhere along the line between, and I know it had to do a lot with scheduling and contracts and all those things, and De Laurentiis being cheap as shit and all that other stuff, but I think that somewhere along the line people stopped taking it seriously. And that's where the fail came from. You know, The fail came from De Laurentiis making it about a profit margin and not about making it art.
Well, that's his whole life there.
Well, but the thing is that he's got his hands on some fantastic art pieces. Like, say what you want about the Dune movie, the David Lynch Dune movie. It's a gorgeous film, right? It looks cool. It has an aesthetic, and it has a huge fucking budget. I mean, that thing they spared no expense on that film, right? But he can make art.
Right. Yeah.
And he's had his hands on art, and the first Conan movie was art. But for whatever reason, did he do Patton? Was he? Was that?
I don't think he was.
I don't think he was.
No, I don't think he was involved in Patton. Maybe.
Who was the?
So have you seen did you see the Jason Momoa Conan?
I did not.
So
that was supposed to also be.
Some people say it's complete shit, but the problem is I feel like as long as you don't take the Schwarzenegger into account, it's a passable movie in a B movie sense. It's almost like they took the sensibilities of like violence or maybe the original intent of Robert E. Howard's kind of gentleman adventurer thing, and they translated it. I mean, it's really weird, and it's cast like a B movie. It's like Rose McGowan plays some weird serpent kind of lady, and what's Stephen Lang, the weird guy, crazy guy from Avatar, is the bad guy.
Oh, great.
Well, again, it's kind of falls within that realm of why the Beastmaster is fun. You know, it's that kind of, it has a lot to, it's very much like Beastmaster.
Okay.
And now I would never sit here on this podcast and say, guys, if you've never seen Beastmaster, you need to check it out.
You're missing out, bro.
But it's, it was the ubiquitous, I remember when I was a kid that like I was watching Johnny Carson, and one time he said, hey, what does HBO stand for? Hey, Beastmaster's on.
Nice.
And I remember just like going like, it's like, he knows what we're thinking. It's that kind of attitude where you're just like, yeah, I think I've seen Beastmaster more than I've seen Conan, because it just didn't make it on the Cinemax run as much as the Beastmaster. But yeah, it's like Conan the Barbarian kind of created that genre and then broke the mold. It's like there really is never, I mean, Lord of the Rings, as much as they take the source material seriously, it's by no means like a movie for grown-ups. It's not like, you know what I mean?
Oh, I thought
well, I mean, you know what I mean? It's like there's not going to be sex and violence, like bloodshed and stuff. A lot of it.
There's plenty of violence.
Well, yeah, I know, but it's all
kill a few orcs, man.
Anyway, the Lord of the Peter Jackson retrospective will be another week.
Another one, yeah, but it's true though. Because what did we have leading up to this? We had Excalibur. We had we had a lot of Shakespearean adaptations. We had Robin Hood type things. But we never really had. I don't think we had much very similar to Conan up to that point. And then again, like Star Wars, something new, unique, and interesting hits a marketplace, and then everybody else rushes out to make their clone, their copy of it, and try and cash in on it. Like, Star Trek did it. There's this 2001 Space Odyssey, whatever, like all those things try to cash in on the Star Wars deal. And the same thing goes for, these other, the Beastmaster series is one, but like these other things that tried.
Like the Barbarian brothers. Remember the See, I never saw any of those, but my wife, apparently that was like regular viewing at their house. The two Barbarian brothers. They're just like, have you ever seen those movies?
No.
So I watched a little bit of them, and I remember their real names. They actually have a brief cameo in Oliver Stone's Natural Born Killers.
Okay.
I think it's only in the extended version.
Okay.
Where it's like Mickey and Mallory chop their legs off with a chainsaw, and they go,
Jesus.
we want to thank Mickey and Mallory for giving us more of something to fight for, or something. It's goofy, but it's this kind of ridiculous fantasy with these twin steroided brothers with like long black hair, and they do like weird quirks, like they laugh, like go like that.
Jeez.
Where you're like, what the heck is this? And the only other one of that genre that I don't think I've ever seen it. Did you ever seen The Sword and the Sorcerer, the one with Lee Horsley?
I think I saw it like back in the day. It was like a VHS rental. But
Yeah.
it's probably been 30 years.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think when we're starting to talk about Beastmaster and sort of, it was probably time to tie it up for the listeners. I feel like this has been the we ate the broccoli. Aside from the Barbarian, I feel like the Destroyer and the Red Sonja is like we're eating the broccoli so we can have the steak for our next when we get into the main meat of Arnold Schwarzenegger. But
yeah, no, it's true. I mean, it's a sad commentary on what could have been for a franchise.
Absolutely.
And it's also kind of an interesting window into Hollywood again, and what happens when people are owed money and there's contracts and there's things like movies get made that are shit. So people make cameos and stuff, or they have these, diminished roles simply to get out of doing something. And, if the scheduling had been better, and if the original pre-production had got off the ground earlier, there's no telling what could have happened with this franchise, and it could have been amazing. But then we get into, like you say, we did our chores, right? We took the medicine, now we can have the candy, and now we'll get into, in another episode, we'll get into the resplendent action hero that is Arnold Schwarzenegger in the mid-late 80s. So
yeah, and I think but I think to get there, I think we had to kind of establish. Like, it could have gone in a very different direction. In some ways, maybe it was advantageous for us, because if he had been doing Conan every 2 years, he wouldn't have done the Terminators. He wouldn't have done Commando. He wouldn't have,
right. And not doing Commando would have been a tragedy.
Yes. So, if you want to reach out and just be like, you guys are crazy. Unless you're going to see us in a couple days at a restaurant in Tukwila. But, hosts at talkingbirdcast.com. We have a website. I'm kind of rebranding it, so it's up there with the episodes and stuff at www.talkingbirdcast.com. We are on Instagram at talkingbirdcast. We are on YouTube, which is something I never talk about, even though that's where we get most of our listens from. We're Talking Bird Podcast on YouTube. Just Google that. If you're on there, we would absolutely appreciate it if you would subscribe, because the more subscribers we can unlock, we can do all kinds of cool things. But YouTube's a little weird now, so if you only have like 8 subscribers, you can't do a lot with do a lot with the platform. So if it's probably more important to subscribe on YouTube than writing a review, because nobody reads podcast reviews.
It's true.
Do you have anything to plug?
No, not at this point. Just you can find me on Twitter at the Sean Judy. Find me on Facebook. Leave comments either on the YouTube page or on the podcast reviews or whatnot. We'd love to hear from people. Again, we are also the hosts at. We'd love to hear people's opinions about this stuff. We like talking about these things. We love doing this. It's great to get some feedback. So
yes, and I always appreciate when we hear from people that have been listening to the show. Well, I think that's it. I would say, again, thanks for listening, and
chew slowly. It's the good stuff.
Chew slowly. It's the good stuff. And if you did not enjoy this episode,
then to hell with you.
Then to hell with you. Goodbye.
You must destroy the talisman, Sonja. Send it into darkness. Swear that you will.
I swear. Who took it?
I don't know. There was a woman with a gold mask. Soldiers.
Where did they take it? North, south, Varna.
She's dead.